32 years ago, a terrible event happened and the Day of Judgment came. Unexpectedly for everyone, a portal appeared in the sky, like an energy hole in space. From this portal came terrible monsters, and the world was enveloped in smoke and flames. Monsters roamed the earth and flew in the sky, destroying everything around them, burning them with fire. In just 1 month, billions of people and hundreds of cities in all countries were destroyed. After the Day of Judgment, everything looked very gloomy and completely deserted, as if after a catastrophe. But some people still survived this sudden disaster. One girl was running away from monsters, and they only shouted after her that they would eat her. And as soon as one of them reached the girl, a shot suddenly rang out. They were one of the few soldiers who also managed to escape death at the clutches of the monsters. The girl, frightened, prepared herself for imminent death. One of the soldiers approached her and extended his hand. The man asked her if everything was okay and said that the place was safe. The girl hugged the soldier with gratitude and began to cry, but he only asked her to calm down. Suddenly, the girl noticed another portal that appeared right above their heads. This area was the last remaining base. One of the people shouted that if the portal opened in the very center, they would all die. A monster appeared that none of them had ever seen before, as a stream of energy flowed from its mouth. At the same time, when everyone began to think that the end was near, people with incredible abilities began to appear among people. And the monsters just continued to destroy and blow up everything around them, trying to exterminate everyone. The girl who was saved by the soldiers opened something that looked like a jellyfish in front of her and touched it. In this way, she discovered her superpower to fight monsters. The appearance of such people was considered a real miracle, and humanity, driven to the brink, began to gather strength for a counterattack. To contain the onslaught of monsters that had gathered at the passage, humanity began to raise hunters. Superpowered people were called upon to become hunters, develop their abilities, and save humanity. In the city that was called the Lost City, the survival rate was 1 in 1,000, and this place was a real reality. Time passed. In the city of Seoul, a new game was currently starting. There were 5 minutes left before the broadcast began, and all players were invited to go to the waiting room. One guy noticed unknown in the list of players and said that it would be better for him to become a hunter rather than hang around in games. The woman confirmed that he really does not allow others to earn money, and she feels sorry for those who play with him. The guy then suggested that unknown was not on another server, and the woman offered to join. This unknown was ranked first among 3 billion players, but no one knew anything about him. This unknown has played over 5,000 games and has never lost. The players were asked to get ready as it was about to start and the countdown had begun. The game began, and this time the events took place in London, one of the lost cities in the game. A guy in a yellow jumpsuit sat with a rifle and muttered that this was the coolest place. And another one in a white shirt urged that if you sit in ambush, then the enemies themselves will come to die. And then he added that the essence of the game is that you need to quickly level up in the rankings and join the leading guild. The girl in the long coat saw through binoculars that one of the opponents was heading towards them. The guy with the machine gun started asking who exactly she saw, a mage or a tank. And then he added that if they had gone towards the museum, they would have missed the free glasses. The guy in the white shirt said that he had said many times that this was a hot spot. The girl continued to look through the binoculars and asked the guys to be quieter. A man appeared on the horizon, simply walking among the ruins. He looked quite ordinary and did not have any weapons in his hands. The girl took a closer look and recognized this guy as the same unknown one. The guy with the machine gun swore and said that they should have gone to the museum after all. And the guy in the shirt replied that the unknown man was a close combat specialist, and we had to keep him from getting close. Then he told the girl Raymond that she was responsible for the left side and that she should not forget about the magic elixir before the cast. And the girl replied that it didn't matter who he was, a ranker or someone else. In any case, she would roast him. The comrades also discussed that the person who came was also a human being, and that rumors were always embellished, and there was no reason to shake in advance. And the guy in the yellow jumpsuit took aim to try to neutralize the unknown. The player with the machine gun also did not stand still and began shooting in the same direction. Raymond used her ability called Sparkling Lightning and launched a discharge that burned to the ground. Lightning struck the place where the unknown person was, and an explosion immediately occurred. The player in the shirt also started shooting, shouting to his comrades not to stop either. The guy in the overalls kept shooting, but he saw that he couldn't hit the unknown. The bullets seemed to bounce off this player without causing him any harm. But those sitting in ambush did not stop their attempts to destroy whoever was approaching them. And suddenly the guy in the shirt started spitting blood, and his eyes turned small and white. The player with the machine gun also began to turn into a monster at that moment, and the unknown person had already approached them with a knife. The girl in the cloak noticed that she had not escaped the fate of her comrades, and soon she became a zombie and the unknown killed her. The player in the yellow jumpsuit started shouting that he was crazy and asking what he was. But the unknown person did not pay attention to this and swung a knife at him. By that time, the guy in the overalls also looked like a zombie, and before he died, he only cursed. At this point, 792 survivors were counted and asked to reach a safe zone marked on the map within 3 minutes. A new hole began to form in space above London as people trained. One in a respirator told his opponent that his attacks would not leave a scratch. And the one who was wearing a gas mask replied that for this insolence, he would tear him to pieces. Suddenly, there was a shock of electricity, and another person with abilities appeared above them. The man could cause massive damage with his lightning, and the two in gas masks ran away. The lightning man found this too easy and decided to try his strike again. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared on that street, and people did not understand how he managed to jump out of the portal. Many were scared and started running, shouting that the admin had gone crazy by releasing the monster into the arena. The monster chased after the fleeing people, continuing to destroy everything around him. And in that place, two people appeared, a man and a girl. The man said that if they had waited longer, they would not have gotten even one kill, and offered to clean there. The girl answered him that he himself said that it was better to be patient once again, and suggested waiting until the monster destroyed everything here. But the man objected, saying that this was a great chance to snatch more kills. And the girl answered him that she was just a support and that he should take care of his own kills. The man wished himself a bon appetit and asked the girl to buff him with a shield. The girl agreed, but only if he kept an eye on the radius of action. And the man in the armored suit went off to continue earning points. He headed towards the sky, and from there he began to try out his circular night strike. A very powerful explosion immediately resounded in the city, destroying several buildings at once. To this, the girl said that he had the right to show off and that she should stay with him at the party. She assumed that it wouldn't be long before she became a high-level ranker. The girl approached the man and said that they were surprisingly well-suited to each other. And she suggested officially forming a guild, because with that amount of points, they would be able to rise immediately. However, the man did not answer her, and she saw that her buff shield had been broken. The girl hoped that this game would go smoothly when suddenly she saw another opponent. She immediately prepared to use her ability, but the enemy was already striking at them. At this time, David, who had the ability Hunter's Eye, was watching on the roof, and he had already taken out 35 players. He had to deal with the last one, and through the scope, he looked for this enemy. Soon he saw someone, but then he realized that it was the unknown, and decided to remove him. David had a brand new sniper rifle, to which he had attached a farmed infrared scope and a suppressor. The target was 2 kilometers away, which gave David a good chance, because with the slightest mistake, he could come under counterattack. David pulled the trigger, and the shot seemed perfect, but the bullet bounced off the unknown. Not believing it, David was perplexed, and then he saw that the unknown was looking straight at him. Then David saw that the unknown man had taken out a dagger and was playing with it. But a moment later, this hedgehog dagger flew towards David and hit him right in the eye. At this point, the game was over, and Unknown became the winner of this round. Kwon Jinsu returned home. He had been looking for a man for a long time, and he wanted to fight him again in battle. After all, he played, one might say, for this reason, but they never met a second time. On the other hand, Kwon didn't see the possibility of meeting again among the billions of players. There was a knock at the door. It was Sua who was supposed to bring food today. The games had completely forgotten about it, and he waited for her to start nagging again. Sua kept knocking, and Kwon hurried to open the door. She immediately realized that he had been playing all night again. 18-year-old Kwon Sua was Jinsu's younger sister and was already a second-year high school student. Jinsu began to deny that he had played, but Sua did not believe him, and then said that she had already asked him not to get involved in games. Then she assumed that her brother just wanted to become a hunter, and that was why he was playing. Jinsu began to convince his sister that it was just a game and that she shouldn't worry. Sua sent the food and asked her brother to clean up after himself so that it wouldn't go bad like last time. The girl also asked the food to put everything in the refrigerator and clean up, and later she wanted to cook jjigae. Jinsu asked his sister if she had any more medicine, and she replied that she had enough for another week. And the brother said that then they need to go to the hospital in a few days, because it's better to stock up in advance. Sua was about to leave and once again reminded her brother about cleaning, even though he was annoyed by such unnecessary concern. The guy received a message about a debt in finances for May, and this month the amount was $1,985,000. After the Day of Judgment, people gained strength and new life, but there were also those who lost a lot. There were those who were infected with a disease called magic flow, and if left untreated, the patient could not last even 3 months. The treatment was to contain the flow with a special medicine, but it was expensive. The majority of the population did not dare to undertake treatment, and they could only hope for state support. However, the selection was incredibly strict. Only 1 in 100 could get this opportunity. Sua also applied but was rejected, and Jinsu had to lie that everything worked out. In fact, he paid for his treatment with money earned from games, and now he needed to earn more. Jinsu thought it would be easier to become a hunter, but his sister was against it. The Gyeonggi-do Disaster Management Center has revealed that the passage in the Pyeongtaek area has disappeared. The staff were delighted by this news, and the captain asked if there were any human casualties. The employee replied that the ex-Varan Guild had personally acted and that there were no casualties. The captain was pleased with this news because he was worried because this place was quite populated. There were 5 emergency control centers under the Korean branch of the Hunters: Gangwon-do, Gyeonggi-do, Chungcheong-do, Jeolla-do, and Gyeongdo. Shin Yeonjun was the captain of the Gyeonggi Center, and as soon as he went out to smoke, the staff noticed a new passage had appeared. They couldn't believe that this was happening for the second day in a row, this time in Seoul, Dongja-gu near Noryangjin Station. It was a C-rank pass, and the staff hoped that there would be few casualties, but losses were still expected. And a little later, the staff determined that the passage was located inside the high school. At this time at school, a friend approached Sua and suggested going to the store. Sua even wanted a cream bun, and her friend asked her to treat her too. And then an emergency message was heard at the school that a passage had opened on the territory of the school stadium. The students were asked to split up by grade level and proceed to the assembly hall, starting with the first grade as during the exercises. At the same time, Jinsu, having finished cleaning, decided to buy groceries since his sister was going to cook. Everything was very expensive, and the guy was cursing. And the people in the store suddenly noticed a passage in the sky through the window. It was also reported that today at 9:30 a.m., a passage opened in a school located in the Noryangan Station area, and an offensive detachment of 4 people was formed. Jinsu realized that this was his sister's school, and abandoning the cart, immediately headed in that direction. At school, a friend pulled Sua by the hand and told her to run so that they wouldn't get sucked into the portal. And the hunters quickly arrived at the scene, and Sua managed to notice them. The hunter captain said that we need to wait a little while for the dungeon to respawn. The captain was also interested in whether the boss monster would appear in the dungeon, since their goal was to capture it. And his subordinate replied that even if it was a C-rank boss, it was still dangerous to go against him with only 4 people. And the captain reproached him for doubting that he could cope with some small boss. The subordinate said that this was not what he meant, but that he needed to be careful because everything could change. But this only enraged the captain because his father considered him sick, and now this bastard looked at him like he was a fool. Here, one of the assistants noticed that the passage was beginning to transform, and the 4 hunters rushed there to find the place where the boss was hiding. Meanwhile, monsters had already appeared in the school itself and were attacking students. Some of the monsters were simply enormous in size, and their bloody mouths reached up to the ceiling. Kwansua found herself trapped at some point, and one of the monsters was already almost near her. Her friend had already called her, having found the exit, and Sua immediately rushed in that direction. There was a passage line beyond the school gates, and many students were glad that they had made it in time. But the teacher asked them not to rush to rejoice, but to calm down and act more carefully. One of the students volunteered to go further first, but suddenly they noticed danger. Right in front of them stood one of the monsters, and all the school children, as well as the teacher, were very scared. This monster stood in front of them, holding the dead body of another student in its paw and prepared to attack. But a squad of hunters, with the captains in front, was already rushing towards them and was ready to destroy the monster. The brave captain immediately grabbed one of the monsters and began to beat him with all his might. He told his assistant not to let the other monsters get close to the children. And one of the hunters used her power and threw an electric net at some of the monsters. The other huntress, in turn, prepared a fireball as a weapon and launched it at the monsters. Having finished with the monsters, the hunters allowed themselves to rejoice a little at this victory. The students were also happy that the hunters came and saved them, and the students were able to see them in person. But Sua thought about it because she saw that before this, these hunters were just standing and watching them. While the other students were rejoicing and admiring the rescuers, Sua was thinking, after all, for the people who were supposed to rush to help, they stood on the hill too calmly. One student said that there was magic in the hunters' actions, and she had only seen such things in games. And the teacher noticed that the net still wasn't catching anything, and the captain replied that they were still in the dungeon, which is why it wasn't catching anything. And when the teacher asked how to get out of here, the captain replied that the dungeon was already gaining strength, and in order to get out, you need to defeat the boss himself. The students were scared, shouting that the boss was the strongest monster in the dungeon and it would be difficult for even 4 hunters to capture him. The captain just grinned and shouted that they were moving out, and then told the others that they could go with them or stay and die here. The teacher immediately agreed to go with them and asked for help in saving as many students as possible. But Sua pulled at his jacket and told him that he couldn't follow those hunters. When the teacher asked why, she replied that she saw them and that they could have saved the students. But they didn't even move from their place. The other students didn't believe her. They didn't understand why they had to just stand and watch. The captain was offended by this and decided that he should teach this girl a lesson so that she would shut up. But the assistant stopped the captain, saying that there was a more important matter and that a pack of werewolves was approaching. The chief shouted that they were just small fry and ordered that they be blocked immediately. At this time, Sua became ill, and the other students leaned over her in panic. The captain, not knowing what was wrong with her, was even a little horrified when he saw Sua's condition, and her friend immediately shouted to the teacher to quickly look for the medicine in her bag. Very soon the bottle of medicine was already in the teacher's hands, and he handed it to the student. The captain thought that in this way the girl had caused a current that attracted the monsters, and he told his assistant that this medicine was a magical inhibitor that their company made, and if it was not given, the mana would surge even stronger. He also said that in this case, there would be no need to wander around looking for the boss, and ordered the assistant to take away the medicine. At this time, other employees did not allow people who came to watch to approach the school, and while people were worried about what would happen to the students, no one noticed how one of them disappeared. While the teacher was fighting with the hunter for the medicine bottle, his arm was suddenly torn off. The captain did this and said that it was necessary to give it up in a good way, and then blood would not have been shed. The frightened children wanted to run away, but the captain gave orders to the assistant not to allow them to do so. And very soon all the students found themselves bound by a magic rope and could not move. And the captain continued to watch Sua. Her attack was already approaching, and the girl even changed in appearance. After a short time, the portal itself began to change, which scared the assistant a little. Another monster appeared from the portal, which looked more terrible than the previous ones. It was the boss himself. The captain, whose name was Jang Woo-hyuk, prepared his sword and said that he would show everyone what kind of man he was. However, he was still in no hurry to attack the monster and waited for it to devour Sua. The monster continued to approach, growling and showing its strength and power, and looked for a victim. Soon he came very close to Sua, but she was under a magical dome, and the monster could not grab her. And then the captain decided to come out of his hiding place and rush to attack the monster. But at the same time, something hit the monster from the other side, and the monster howled in pain. It was that same unknown one who came and rushed into battle with the evil beast. The guy attacked him from all sides, but the monster turned out to be really strong. The captain saw the boy fighting with the monster, but he couldn't understand who it was, even though he saw that it was a man. Chan told his assistant to find out what other detachment was sent here, and he answered that there were still 20 minutes before reinforcements arrived, and they didn't tell him what kind of detachment it would be. The captain felt furious that some bastard had jumped out and taken away his moments of triumph. Meanwhile, the boy continued to beat the monster, not giving him a chance to win. Very soon he hit the monster in the forehead, from which he immediately began to lose his strength and die. Having defeated the monster, the boy immediately went to Sua and began asking about her health. The girl was very surprised when she saw her brother in front of her, who had dealt with the monster. And the teacher told him that the hunters took Sua's medicine to use her as bait. The captain came up to the guy and told him that he had upset all the plans, and then asked if he was a hunter from the guild. Jinsu asked the captain if he had taken the medicine, but he only said that he had asked first. And the guy replied that if he wanted to know whether he was really from the guild, he should answer the question. Then Jinsu said that hunters no longer save people, but make bait out of them, and that they are worse than dogs after this. The captain intended to deal with the guy, but his assistant said that first they needed to confirm his identity. After all, killing a member of a leading guild could result in serious problems, and even he, the son of a leading company, would have a hard time resolving this matter. Then the captain held out a bottle of medicine, asking if it was it. And the boy said that he would make Sua pay for her suffering. Jinsu said that he would take revenge until he begged for mercy, but the captain only smirked. And then he said that first the guy should tell what guild he was in, but Jinsu was already rushing towards him with a knife in his hand. Chan decided to use the ability, turning his skin to stone in seconds. And when the captain was ready, he shouted to his opponent to attack. The guy, in turn, moved very quickly around Chan so that he could not hit him. The captain said that he would grind his bones into powder, no matter how fast he moved. Chan still hit the guy, and he used a sharp twist of the law of causality. This ability works 1 second at a time and provides up to 13 chances. This skill was considered absurd and passive, distorting such causality as death and going beyond the laws of physics. This time, Jinsu was able to avoid the captain's blow, although he was sure that the boy was caught. At this moment, Kwon also approached his opponent and stabbed him in the side with a knife. The captain's assistants were afraid for him and wanted to rush to his aid immediately. And while Chan was cursing and trying to escape from his opponent, he quickly caught up with him and grabbed him. The guy put a knife to the leader's neck and told his assistants not to make any moves. The assistant hunter was only surprised that he was able to suppress their leader with such ease and tried to understand what kind of guy he was. Jinsu also told Chan not to struggle if he didn't want to die from a slit throat. While his assistant stood at attention, Chang waited for his moment to act. And choosing the moment, the captain tried to free himself from the captor, but he turned out to be more agile and immediately knocked the enemy to the ground. And then the guy kicked him in the stomach and called him a loser for using people as bait. In response, the captain asked Jinsu if he knew who he was, but the guy didn't care. He told Chan that even if he were the president's son, it wouldn't change anything. And then the captain asked to let him go, and then Chil, the group, will reward the guy generously. Jinsu replied that it was funny because Chan turned out to be a nobody with a gold spoon in his mouth and took the medicine from him. Then the boy went to his sister's friend and cut the thread that bound her. Jinsu also handed over a bottle of medicine to the girl and asked her to give it to Sua right away. The girl brought the pill to her friend's mouth and began asking her to swallow the medicine. Sua did it with difficulty, but then she felt better, and even her face became normal. Jinsu also threw his knife to the girls and told them to cut the students' ropes with it. While the girls got up and left, the guy grabbed the captain by the hair and dragged him along with him. Kwon Jinsu called Chan a golden bastard and said that his boys were finished. The guy kicked his opponent in the face, and he only grumbled in response that he would deal with him. At this, Jinsu kicked the captain hard in the face again, causing him to become contorted. The guy continued to beat the captain of the hunters, but he only continued to snap back. At some point, the captain was still able to hit Kwon and smirked so that he didn't hope that he could get off so easily. The guy just replied that he was still talking, and then he noticed that the passage was starting to disappear. Captain Jang gave orders to his assistant Donghyun to break the core and not to delay. The assistant, putting on a special mask, immediately rushed to carry out the leader's order. On the way, he kept thinking about how this simple guy could deal with the boss with just one knife. The core was located among the remains of the monster, and Donghyun prepared to smash it. Jinsu told the other students to get out of here quickly, and the captain shouted to him that now no one would be able to leave this place. Even if they ran, they would not be able to outpace the speed of destruction. And the guy replied that in that case, Chan would also stay here with them and die. Meanwhile, the core was already beginning to collapse, and the captain continued to shout that everyone would die anyway. The students noticed that electrical discharges began to appear in the air around them. They started running, and Sua shouted to her brother not to stand still, but to run with them. The school children hurried to cross the borderline, thinking that they would be safe there. Donghyun approached the leader and asked if they should retreat too, and if he was okay. The captain only became angry, continuing to shout that no one would get out of here and called the students pathetic insects. Then Chang told his men to gather and took out a scroll, adding that he himself did not intend to die with these worthless people. The captain continued to mutter that everyone would die, since there was no way out of the dungeon with the core destroyed. And then he laughed, showing the scroll, and said that only with it was there a chance to get out. The time for an opportunity to escape was running out, and Donghyun began to hurry the leader. The 4 hunters got ready, and the captain was already giving the command to the artifact to return. Suddenly, something quickly rushed past them, and Chan noticed that the scroll was no longer in his hands. Jinsu decided to take the scroll from him for return and realized what they were planning. The captain, in a rage, shouted to his assistants to seize and kill this guy. Dongyun cursed that it would have been better if they had just left, and the rest of the assistants used their powers of slow and fire lightning. And just as the hunters were about to strike at Jinsu, an explosion was heard where they were standing. The assistants immediately fell in different directions because the guy overpowered them again. And the guy shouted goodbye that he was taking the scroll with him, and they, insignificant bastards, would die here. The captain was simply furious that he, Jang Woo-hyuk, had to meet his death here. The leader and his assistants watched as the students ran away, but they remained here. At the Hunter's Korean branch, Im Da-young from the Human Resources Department was trying to figure out what happened inside the portal. They trusted the attack force led by Jang Woo-hyuk, and despite the leader's low rank, he had high-ranking hunters under his command. Moreover, Bae Dong-hyun is a B-rank AD, main damage dealer. They hoped that they could handle the C-rank pass in a matter of seconds. But the passage had not yet been destroyed, and Dungeon was currently active, and Im made a request to contact the attack squad. And then the employee realized that the detachment sent by their branch was destroyed. Then Im noticed that the scroll of return magic, which was registered in the name of Jang Woo-hyuk, was activated. However, it was not the hunters they expected to see who returned. They were Professor Junhyun, student Lee Soni, and Kwon Suai. There were originally supposed to be no survivors in the area, and Dayan wondered how they managed to return instead of the hunters. The girl noticed a boy in the footage and was sure that this man was the key to the solution. She determined his height to be between 175 and 108 centimeters and his age to be up to 25. A craftsman of his level could not simply die in the dungeon. In that case, there is a high probability that there are not 3 but 4 survivors, and Daeon decided to find him. She had until 2 o'clock tomorrow, and after that, Cheel would intervene. Group. And they use any means and methods to find out the cause of death of the chairman's youngest son. After all, for the sake of his own son, he is ready to do anything. And in this case, it is necessary to hide the identities of the survivors by any means possible. The girl started going through files with the names Oh Jun-hyun, Lee So-ni, Lee Jun-il, Kwon Sua, and then found that the guardian was Kwon Jin-soo. Im Da-young was sure that this Jin-soo was the guy she was looking for. And at headquarters, the chairman was furious that his people had still not found any leads. He even suggested that they were just standing there, and then said that if the portal was closed, it needed to be opened. And then he swung again at one of them to hit him with the triangular stand. But at that moment, his son intercepted his hand and said that those people were unusual, and there was no need to be so angry. It was the eldest son of Chairman Cheel, a group named Jang Jae-hyuk, and the chairman sent them on their way. But he couldn't believe that Woo-hyuk had suffered from some werewolves. Plus, Bae Dong-hyun was assigned to him, which meant that the guy's abilities were much higher than Dong-hyun's. The chairman asked Jae-hyuk to bring this guy because it's hard to judge his abilities from just a video. And the son replied that even Dong-hyun was no match for him, but the chairman was confident that Jae-hyuk could handle him. The eldest son also said that the enemy was not so simple. But judging by the lack of weapons and protection, he was a poor man and not an opponent for him at all. The chairman praised his son, and he replied that his father could rely on him. Meanwhile, Im Da-young was in her office trying to call Kwon Jin-soo. When the guy picked up the phone, the girl introduced herself and said that she was from the Korean branch of the Hunters. She also said that she knew that Jin-soo entered the dang that opened in the Yeongdongpo area today. Da-young then also offered Jin-soo her help in this regard, but he began to refuse. However, the girl asked him not to rush because she knew about Kwon Sua's condition and asked if he needed payment for her treatment. At the same time, the girl thought that since he even entered the dungeon for his sister's sake, there was a high probability of reaching an agreement with him. Jin-soo was quite interested that they were willing to pay for his sister's treatment. And Daeon replied that they would take full responsibility for the costs of treatment and more. And then she suggested discussing the details when they met and asked if the guy had time now. Jin-soo suggested that the girl meet near the hospital in a 24-hour cafe. Daeon, saying that she was already leaving, was glad that she had managed to find this guy. Kwon recalled, while waiting for Da-young, how he had to fight monsters and how the hunters acted insignificantly. He was disgusted that they wanted to add a few merits to themselves by using the students as bait. And Jin-soo would like to make this public because no one will believe it. And in the end, only they will suffer. And in this damn world, only those with power are good. In this world, nothing comes for free either, and Im Da-young may well make absurd demands. Jin-soo remembered how he immediately took Sua to the hospital, and the doctor said that it could be called a miracle that she survived. And then the doctor asked to let him know if the guy was ready to continue treating his sister. However, for Sua's sake, he was ready to do anything. And then Im Da-young arrived, a little late. Jin-soo got straight to the point and asked the girl to tell him what she wanted. And Daeon then replied that she had the intention of hiring him. This even surprised the guy. The girl said that he would need to become a hunter as this was a condition for receiving treatment. Daeyoung also said that they would provide Jin-soo with protection because, as she expected, Kwon didn't know anything about Jang Woo-hyuk. She said that there was one offensive team in the dungeon, and it consisted of 4 people, led by Hunter Jang Woo-hyuk. The guy replied that they were all killed by monsters, and the girl continued that Woo-hyuk's father is the chairman of Chil Group. But Jin-soo didn't yet understand what this had to do with him. And Da-young said that most likely he would be looking for him for the death of his son. And the guy asked again if he would really take on the search for him and the survivors in order to release his anger. She replied that Chan could do anything to get rid of the accumulated emotions. Jin-soo thought about it because people like the chairman are quite capable of this. However, becoming a real hunter and protecting Dunji is completely different from what it is in the game. And it is not known how long it will take to protect the dungeon. The guy heard that it could take a few days or a whole month. Moreover, the cleanup could drag on, and during this time, Sua would be left completely alone. Jin-soo was afraid that if during this time his sister had an attack of magical flow, or something went wrong, he might not make it in time. But also, no one knows what might happen in dungeon. And if something happens to him, Sua will have no one left to protect her. That's why Kwon delayed the moment of becoming a hunter as long as possible. And now they will have to face those who have great power in their hands. The boy didn't know if he could win on his own, and if he could make sure it didn't affect Sua in any way. Jin-soo said that they couldn't protect his sister, and Da-young replied that the best thing for him and his sister right now was to team up with them. The guy replied that he agreed to try and asked what he needed now. The girl replied that first of all, they needed to sign an official contract, and they needed to determine the real level of skills and abilities that Jin-soo possessed. Bait got out, Jin-ho. People were a little surprised by the appearance of this A-rank hunter from the Hwarang Guild. Jin-soo just walked to the edge of the crowd and noticed a bustle among the people. Jin-ho already knew why he was here and was a little unhappy that he had to be in charge of recruiting new recruits. Last time, Peck showed stubbornness, and instead of the easy dungeon that was ordered from above, he entered a high-level dungeon. Of course, the newcomers were smeared across the wall. Of the 13 people, only 3 survived, including Jin-ho himself. For this mistake, he was banned from entering the dungeons and ordered to only recruit newcomers. It was announced that the individual test would soon begin, and everyone was asked to concentrate. Initially, the test was supposed to be carried out one by one. But due to the large number of participants, 30 devices for measuring mana were prepared. After receiving the number, the participants were asked to approach the desired device, after which the check would be carried out. Jin-soo was assigned number 216 and was eagerly waiting for his turn. Soon a joyful cry was heard from one of the guys who had been given a D rank. Other guys of the same rank invited him to join them, and suddenly one of them noticed something. Another participant was furious that he had been given a rank at the normal level, and he disagreed with it, shouting that the machine was faulty and they were all scammers. The service girl asked him to calm down because he could harm others, and also claimed that the device was working properly and they had no reason to deceive him. And 2 more girls were happy that they got an F rank, and this made that muscular guy even more angry. He thought it was impossible that he didn't pass. Abayaku Jinho found it funny that a mountain of steroid-fueled muscle was blaming the measuring device for everything. The muscular guy heard this and, approaching Peck, began to ask him who he was. Jinho replied that if you follow the strongman's logic, then since he is bigger, he should be stronger than him, Bake. And the strongman replied that he meant that the device had simply broken down. And Peck offered to check it out, and if he found no faults, then the muscular guy would accept the result. Jinho immediately got down from his seat and approached the supposedly broken device. Putting his hand on the monitor, the guy began to wait for the result to be announced. And as expected from an A ranker, his result was confirmed, and the participants were simply amazed by it. Jinho told the muscular guy to get lost, and all he could do was apologize for his behavior. Meanwhile, it was Kwon Jinsu's turn and he placed his palm on the monitor. The result of Jinsu was simply amazing, and people could not believe that such a thing could happen. Jinho was also interested in who this guy number 216 was. And at the distribution center, a dispute began over which guild would receive this participant. But at the same time, the data on Jinsu was blocked, and Bayek, listening to these disputes, realized that he would not be able to find out anything. However, Jinho dialed the phone and reported that a big catch had been made. Dayoung knew secret information about Kwon Jinsu, whose mana value was 19715, rank AA, and position irregular. The girl told the guy that with such an indicator, the hunter's branch was ready to pay 10 times more. Soon, Dayoung brought Kwon the coffee he had been waiting for, and she asked if their agreement was still in effect. The guy took this as meaning that he had the right to refuse, and the girl replied that if she wanted to, then yes. Jinsu was also worried that he would not have any free time if he joined the guild, but he still agreed. Dayeon was happy about this and said that she would immediately go and report this to the manager. The girl left, and the guy noticed that this manager was much more simple-minded than he thought. 20 minutes later, the girl returned and said it was time to sign the contract. She handed Jinsu a capsule, and he realized that it was a biochip that he would need to swallow. Dayeon replied that it would collect information about him and transfer it to his smartphone. It was an exclusive hunter nanochip, like a kind of ID card on which all the data was recorded. Kwon asked if Dayoung had swallowed such a chip, and she replied that she had not, as her ability was determined to be inadequate. The girl even felt sad that her ability turned out to be so useless that it didn't even manifest itself in any way. But then she added that it was thanks to this that she met Jinsu and suggested that he swallow the chip right away. As soon as the guy swallowed the capsule, his phone rang and a virtual screen appeared in front of him. And then a message popped up saying that an anomaly had been detected and that it could cause a system failure, and asking if he wanted to continue. Jinsu tried to cover the screen with his hands. Dayoung saw this and thought that the guy was not okay. Or a mosquito had flown into the office. She even thought that she might have mixed up the medications. And Kwon realized that only he could see this text, and so now he had an important choice to make. But the guy had already gone too far to doubt, and he pressed the implement button. A new message immediately appeared that a discrepancy had been detected in the system and the anomaly was active. Then Kwon saw that he had 4 abilities. The girl noticed his surprise and said that there was no need to worry. Jinsu replied that he was fine and then offered to check everything, and Dayoung gave him the smartphone. The guy turned it on and realized that only he knew about the manifestation of irregularity. He showed the data to Dayoung, and she said that he had now officially joined the ranks of the hunters. And to conclude, Im handed Jinsu the contract, saying that without his signature, it would not be valid. Kwon read in the contract that in addition to Sua's treatment and obtaining the rights of a 7th-rank civil servant, he could also choose a car and a house. Jinsu signed because he thought the problem wasn't in the terms of the contract, he just received a gift he couldn't even imagine. Then Dayeon said that at first she advises choosing low-level dungeons to gain experience. Kwon agreed and left, and the girl said at the end that they would contact him soon. Dayeon was glad that everything had worked out, and now she needed to report on the success. Approaching the branch manager's door, Im noticed something unusual, as if there was a hunter there. The girl was afraid that this hunter might attack the leader or try to intercept Jinsu, and decided to eavesdrop. But then the door swung open, a blonde man came out and grabbed Dayeon's briefcase. The blonde told her to get lost, but she didn't understand, and he repeated that she should get lost and not block the way. And while they were arguing, the leader shouted for them to stop and told the blonde Kenneth to go home. Kenneth's manager promised to do everything possible to facilitate his request, and he left. Upon entering, Dayeon asked who the blonde man was, and the manager replied that Kenneth had been sent from the European branch and would be spending some time in Korea. Then the boss started asking her if everything went well with Jinsu. Dayoung replied that everything was fine and handed over the contract. Meanwhile, Kwon himself went to the cafe, and he couldn't stop thinking about whether he had done the right thing. The manager praised the manager for her excellent work, and she giggled contentedly. Later that evening, Jinsu went to the building where he could choose a room for training. At this time, there was no one in the hall, but the guy considered his choice to be correct, although he felt a little ashamed. The waitress at the counter dozed off, and Jinsu coughed to wake her up. The girl, half asleep, thought it was the director and immediately began to report that she had not slept at all. And then she saw that it was a visitor, and Kwon said he would like to use the equipment. The girl looked at his appearance. then asked for his ID and said that the public room would cost 10,000 won per hour. But Jinsu needed a private room, which cost 50,000, and he put the money on the counter for her. The girl was surprised by such a quantity of cash, and at that time, Kwon was already giving her his ID. After checking, the attendant saw that he was AA ranked and a top-class ranker. She even asked again if he was the same Kwon Jinsu, and he confirmed and asked which room he could use. The girl gave him room number 3, saying it was their best room, and the guy went there. Opening the door, Jinsu saw a huge room with a combat training apparatus in the middle. Kwon was in no hurry, because he would still have many chances to use his skills in real combat. Now it would be enough for him to just test them once, and he began to think about how many low-level monsters to take for the test. Jinsu set up a setup of 30 F-rank goblins, and the projectors hanging from the ceiling immediately turned on. Frayne, with the ability Poison and shooting out disintegrating saliva, immediately appeared. For the fight, Kwon chose a regular knife as his weapon and prepared to fight the goblins. The monsters started attacking the guy with their clubs, and he used the reflection skill. The bright light made the goblins freeze for a moment, and Kwon jumped and began to cut them down. After a short time, the monsters were defeated, and Jinsu requested the status window. The battle time lasted 1 minute and 50 seconds, and now Kwon had to test his most important ability. Kwon pressed exchange points, and it showed that this ability was the second one, although the guy previously thought that it was the very first in the world. And then an energy ball appeared in the middle of the room, which immediately flared up, and in its place there was a huge hourglass on the floor. Jinsu thought out loud that this was another monster, and immediately a shiny ball with a mouth appeared under the clock and said that a monster sounded offensive. Kwon asked the construct what it was, and the ball replied that it was Jinsu's new ability. Then this shiny ball with a mouth began to turn into a long snake and wrap itself around the frightened guy, getting ready to tell him the most important thing. The snake stretched out its head and pointed at the hourglass, then told Kwon to listen carefully. The snake said that when all the sand falls, she will no longer be able to maintain physical form. And then she added that it was better to listen to an explanation of the ability than to waste time on chatter. Jinsu assumed that with that much sand, they had enough time, but then asked if the snake was a monster or not. And she explained that exchanging points would allow Kwon to acquire one of the currently existing special abilities. Then she clarified that a good ability would cost quite a lot and turned into a ball again. The boy also heard that the special ability would be chosen according to the situation he would be in. Jinsu asked how he could get points, and the ball replied that it would give him tasks and the reward would depend on their difficulty level. The first task was for warming up. It was necessary to clear the dungeon F rank, easy difficulty level in 24 hours, and the reward for this is 10 points. While the guy was thinking, the ball advised him to say apple to start the task. The next day in Seoul, a guy with green hair, Jang Shmee-hyuk, was sitting in a car, smoking and asking how things were. The soldier in special uniform replied that they had taken care of all the security outside. The soldier also said that they sent out jamming signals so that no one would suspect them for an hour, neither the police nor the hunters. Shmee-hyuk saw other soldiers guarding the armored car and muttered that the guy wanted some fresh air too. Chan got out of the car and gave the command to proceed as planned and proceed, and teams Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie began to move out. The militants headed to the nearest building where they were to carry out the mission. It was a hospital where nurses stood at the reception desk and suspected nothing. One of them was complaining that she wanted to sleep when armed men burst in and shouted for everyone to be quiet. The girls were frightened, asking what they needed, and then the chairman's eldest son entered with a knife in his hands. The nurses started asking what he was doing, since this was a hospital, and Shmee-hyuk said that he was looking for someone who should be here. Then he asked one nurse if she had heard about the passage that had appeared at Yongdongpo High School. Chong then said that if she wanted to live, she had to hand over all the records of survivors sent by the Hunter branch. The girl agreed and went with Shmee-hyuk to a separate office where she began to search for data on the computer. It was classified information. As soon as the nurse found it, Chan pushed her away and began looking through it himself. The chairman's son searched for Kwon Sua's name and found out that she was transferred to the Hunter branch yesterday. When Shmee-hyuk finished, the nurse asked if he had spared her, and Chan turned around, pointed a knife at the girl, and then cut off her name tag. Her name was Pak De-som. The guy decided not to keep her any longer and said that was it. When he left, the nurse sat down as her legs were giving way from fear. And although Chan said that he would spare her, there was still some kind of catch in his impudent face. As he passed by Senior Sergeant Park, Chmehyuk gave him the command to open the container. As soon as the rear doors of the armored bus opened, the face of a monster immediately appeared from there. Without leaving the container, the monster stuck out its long tongue, which it used to reach into the building. The end of the tongue immediately grabbed the nurse who was helping Chan and pulled her back with him. The girl instantly found herself in the monster's mouth, and it swallowed her whole. The rest of the people began to run away, and Chmehyuk gave the command to leave, leaving the monster to finish the job he had started. Kwon Jinsu came to visit his sister and saw the news on TV that a C-rank monster had appeared at the university hospital at 4 a.m. the previous day. It was a marsh frog, and although the Gyeonggi branch claims that the opening of the passage was not recorded, some believe that this was an attempt to cover up their mistake. Kwon only cursed that they even made it to the hospital, and understood what would have happened if they hadn't transported Sua in advance. Jinsu decided that he would not leave it like this. But at the same time, there was no hurry, because the primary concern was Sua's safety. Moreover, the guy needed to build up his strength in order to enter into battle with the monsters. On the advice of manager Dayoung, Jinsu should use Hanter Net, and the guy entered the necessary conditions. A point opened on the map, and then data that in Seoul, Bukhansan, Danjef, Rank, and the main monsters there are orcs. It was also said that help from EF hunters was possible, and 30 people in total. And Kwon decided that today he would enter there. After the Day of Judgment, the entire territory of North Korea was captured by orcs, who turned the place into a huge fortress. But it didn't last long, and humanity began to fight back. And after a week-long battle, most of the orcs were destroyed. And only a small part managed to survive and escape into the cave. And these pitiful remnants turned into the orc dungeon. When Jinsu arrived there, he saw that he was a little late. Lee Sung-yoon called him and clarified that the person who had come was Kwon Jinsu. The guy immediately admitted that this was the first time he was defending Dungeon and asked to take care of him. Lee said that there was nothing written about it in the profile. And when Jinsu said that if it was embarrassing, he could not participate, but Sang-yoon said that it was okay. Lee also said that this dungeon is for beginners, and the main thing is that Kwon does not go forward, and they will take on dangerous positions. Another huntress came up and said that everyone was ready. Lee immediately introduced her to Kwon. It was Yoon Ae-yeon, an E-rank sniper, and she is in charge of the DD and support positions. Sang-yoon also introduced Jinsu to her. Lee sent the sniper first, and he himself was going to give Kwon a weapon and immediately go after her. When the girl left, Lee invited Jinsu to follow him, and they approached the van with various weapons. Sang-yoon offered to choose, and Jinsu took 2 pistols for himself, after which they set off. On the way, Kwon asked if the dungeon was profitable. F rank. Lee replied that yes, and that it doesn't cost much money at all. Then Sang-yoon said that Aeon could take all the items, and Jinsu suggested that they hurry. Soon they were already in the cave, and a message opened in front of Kwon that this was the dungeon of the Red Helmet Orc tribe, and a training quest had been activated. They walked further, and Sang-yoon suddenly noticed a large number of orc corpses, which he considered strange. Jinsu asked if that wasn't for the best, and Lee replied that there were simply more of them than reported and that something must have gone wrong. The other hunters were already fighting the orcs with all their might, but there really were too many of them. Many hunters were bitten and wounded. It seemed like the monsters were only getting bigger. And at the other end of the cave, the chief orc sat on the throne and commanded that all the people be killed. The orcs began to attack with even greater force, and the hunters already thought that they would die here. Suddenly, the people saw a light behind them. It was one of the hunters using her ability. The girl turned this small flame into a huge flame, which she directed at the orcs. The monsters were immediately engulfed in flames and began to flee from there in all directions. By this time, Lee and Jinsu arrived, and Sang-yoon asked what happened. The girl replied that another passage had opened inside the dungeon, and Lee asked what was wrong with the others. The girl replied that they had split up when they were running away. At first, they had the advantage, but then something happened. Kwon asked how many men they had lost, and the girl replied that many had died in the first battle, and some had fallen behind during the escape. Sang-yoon started looking for Yoon Ae-yeon, and the girl pointed towards the passage, saying that they were inside. She also said that they sent a request for help to the branch office, and rankers should arrive soon to rescue her. But Lee said that while they waited, it would be too late, and he had to save her. Sang-yoon began to ask the others to help him, but they replied that they could no longer act. And the hunters advised him and Kwon to leave this place if they wanted to live. The girl only added that they themselves also wanted to live, and, apologizing, hurried after the others. Sanyun told Jinsu to leave too, and he would catch up with them after he saved his comrade. However, Kwon decided to go with him. Jinsu was glad that he met a worthy person here. Lee wanted to tell him something when he saw that the guy was spinning around like a whirlwind, using the acceleration ability. Kwon immediately headed into the passage, leaving Hunter Lee Sang-yoon behind him. Jinsu found himself in a cave with orcs and immediately began attacking them with pistols. Their leader shouted that they should tear this man to shreds and not even leave his skin. But the guy still didn't retreat, and he kicked them and continued shooting, killing one after another. The fight lasted for some time until Jinsu ran out of bullets in his clips, but even after that, he did not stop. And then Lee Sun-yoon appeared in the cave, rushing to help his comrade and preparing to fight. But when he appeared, there were only orc corpses in the cave. And Lee began to interrogate Kwon about who he really was. The guy only replied that he hadn't finished cleaning yet because there were still a lot of orcs left. The monsters actually came again, and the leader ordered them to kill the hunters. Jinsu prepared to use another of his abilities, and all the spears that the orcs threw at the hunters flew back at them. One of the orcs began to ask how they could kill these people, and the other answered that they all needed to attack together. While the orcs were arguing among themselves, Jinsu noticed that there were survivors nearby. Kwon saw sniper Yoon Ayong, who was preparing to shoot at the orcs from cover. And just as another of the surviving hunters jumped with a shield to attack the orcs, she fired. The shield-wielding hunter told her that they couldn't hold out much longer at this rate. And Yun replied that help was already here. The man asked where, and Ion showed that the orcs were falling one after another and went on to shoot at them. The man didn't see anyone, however, and another orc knocked his shield out of his hands, and he decided it was time to run away from here. Suddenly, the girl noticed how a young man burped at an orc near them and knocked him down with his feet, and then finished him off with pistols. The guy also dealt with the rest of the orcs, and the two hunters couldn't believe that he did it alone. Jinsu turned around and confirmed that he was alone, and the girls said that they had wounded and it was impossible to go straight ahead. Kwon said that this complicated matters and then asked Yoon to borrow a weapon, preferably a dagger. The girl gave him 3 daggers, and as soon as Jinsu took one, it began to glow. Ayan began to ask why this happened, but the guy only replied that he would clear the way for them. Jinsu immediately launched his dagger toward the remaining orcs and began to pierce them one by one. Kwon rushed at the remaining orcs with another dagger and quickly dealt with them. The chief orc, seeing all this, only growled angrily on his throne and gave orders to kill this man. Jinsu saw him and threw a dagger at him, which hit the target straight on. Yoon Yeon and her partner couldn't believe that this hunter was able to kill the leader with one blow. But Kwon replied that although it was a shame, the chief orc was still not defeated. The dagger hit the orc's armor and simply shattered it without touching the monster itself. The leader ordered the others to form a battle line, and the girl noticed that this only raised their fighting spirit. But Kwon still had one more dagger, and while the orcs were gathering, the boy told his comrades to hide for a while. He himself prepared to fight off attacks and kill the next batch of orcs. And as usual, the orcs only received wounds from Jinsu and fell dead. And when they were finished, Kwon went to look for the leader in order to finish him off as well. The main orc only snapped back when he saw Jinsu and aimed his spear at him. But the guy managed to jump towards him and was already mercilessly stabbing him right in the heart. After several strong blows, the orc leader lay dead on the floor. The remaining orcs saw this and decided to retreat, realizing how strong their enemy was. Kwon received a message that he had received the orc commander's helmet and 3 low-level magic stones. The guy realized that these were trophies, and then another message came that the quest was completed and he received 10 points. Lee Sun-yoon was only surprised at how the newbie was able to complete this task so easily. After all, even a B ranker and A ranker couldn't do that, and Lee wondered who this guy was. Jinsu approached him and asked if everything was okay with him, and also said that it was time to leave. Sun-yoon agreed with him, and they set off, taking Yoon Ayong and her partner with them. At this time, help arrived from outside the mountain. Park Sung-hyuk came out and shouted in displeasure that he had to drag himself here. He looked at the map and found survivors. Then he assumed that the orcs were rushing out. The girl next to him replied that they must not be orcs, judging by their small numbers. But Park still doubted that anyone could have survived there, and the girl determined that they were definitely not orcs. San-hyuk even became interested that someone managed to escape, and 4 hunters began to emerge from the cave. Outside sat those hunters who had fled from the battlefield, and one shouted that there had been a double passage. They did not believe that these 4 would survive, and now they felt ashamed of their actions. The girl who used fire turned to Sanyun and began to ask for forgiveness, because they had to help them until the very end. But Lee only replied that he was glad they were safe. He understood that they had made that decision in order to survive. Park Sang-hyuk came up and started asking how they managed to survive in that cave among the orcs. Lee immediately began to tell that they were saved only thanks to Jinsu. He also said that today was Kwan's first hunt. Pat couldn't believe that the first time he managed to break through a horde of orcs and save people. People started to discuss it too, and thought that Jinsu was a magician or had telekinesis. Sang-hyuk called Kwan and asked if Sang-yoon was telling the truth, but the boy remained silent and Park said that he would make him talk. He immediately used his ability and wanted to see how Jinsu would handle it. People saw that unusual smoke was appearing and immediately began to run in different directions. Jinsu blew out the smoke and asked Pak what he was going to do, and Pak replied that it was just a small test. Then Sang-hyuk said that Kwan has great promise and he can help him grow. Pak also invited the boy to join his guild called Shamless. But Jinsu refused him, and he began to shout that the guy didn't even know what he was refusing. Kwan responded that it didn't sound like an offer, but more like a cheap threat. Pak got angry and told the guy to watch his words if he didn't want to die, and blew smoke again. But Kwan was not afraid of this, and he replied that he does not get along with people he does not like. Sang-hyuk responded that this was not the answer he wanted to hear and pointed his sword. Jinsu decided to use the ability Observation, but the skill level was low. Then the guy called for a point exchange, and a ball with a mouth appeared, which saw that Jinsu had just started the task and he was already in trouble. Kwan told the ball that he wanted to exchange points, but the ball replied that he needed to dodge Park's attack first. Char said that Kwan should dodge at any cost, because he could die even if it only touched him. Meanwhile, Sang-hyuk did not wait and struck his blow, and Jinsu tried to stop him with his dagger. But for some reason, this didn't work, and then Kwan blocked the enemy's weapon with his fist. Pak said it wasn't bad, but this time Kwan should start worrying. Sang-hyuk swung his sword at the boy again, confident that Jinsu wouldn't be able to block it this time. A large explosion occurred at the site of their clash, and Lee Sun-yun was even afraid of what was happening. However, Kwan was able to stick the dagger into the sword and asked if this was the sword of the legacy left behind. In response, Park asked how the guy knew this, and Jinsu said that he was emitting bad energy. After that, Sang-hyuk took out another weapon, the dragon blood sword, Balmung. Kwan knew that changing the law of causality wouldn't work in this case, but this time it was his turn to attack. The ball offered the guy to choose one of 4 cards: hidden, 500 points; corresponding, 100 points; regular, 30 points; or random, 20 points. Jinsu only had 80 points and asked the ball to throw in at least 20 points. Char replied that although he liked Kwan, it was against the rules. So the guy decided to exchange 80 points for random cards. Jinsu received 4 special abilities: Let Me Go on a Picnic and Clear Weather for Tomorrow. Another one is the ability Electrification, which activates 5,000 volts when attacking. The third is I Am the King of Memorization, and the fourth is Interest in the Opposite Sex. But none of them seemed acceptable to Kwan, and he was left with only one-on-one victory over his opponent. Jinsu prepared to attack when an electric shock erupted and hit Sang-hyuk. Lee Yuna came up and told Pak not to cross the line, and he realized that she was trying to stop him. Yuna continued to tell Sang-hyuk to control himself if he knew how to do it. Pak pointed his sword at her, threatening to cut off her head if she didn't neutralize her magic. But the girl replied that an order had come from the branch, and Pa realized that the matter was urgent, since she herself had come to tell about it. Lee Yuna also said that a raid on the industrial area is planned in a month. Sang-hyuk replied that they were crazy to aim there, and the girl replied that he could ask about the rest himself if he was interested. Pak agreed that today they needed to finish the showdown with Kwan. Sang-hyuk remembered that more than 1,000 people were sent to their deaths back then, and he didn't understand why he would commit such recklessness again. Kwan's whole body was still shaking after Park, and then Yuna asked him how he dared to attack Sang-hyuk. She even suggested that he was crazy, but Jinsu said that saying such a thing was too much. Kwan said that this was their first meeting, and the girl gave him her business card, saying that if he suddenly decided to go somewhere, he should contact her first. The guy asked him why he needed it, and Yuna replied that Da-young's little sister asked her to be his support. Apparently, Da-young was afraid to leave Jinsu alone, and the guy thought it was probably because of Cheel Group. Yuna said goodbye to Kwan, and Sanyun came up to him and asked to work with him. Lee also said that he still has a lot to learn, and he has been a hunter for 4 years and knows a lot. Jinsu thought that this might be useful since all he did was play in the Lost City. Then Kwon asked Sung-yoon where he could get useful items, and he replied that there was a proven place on Dongdaemun. Jinsu said goodbye to him, saying that they would see each other at Dongdaemun tomorrow, and went back. As he walked down the steps, Kwon saw that the promised car had been sent to him. Already behind the wheel, the guy began to think that in the Lost City, Park Sang-hyuk would not have been his opponent. However, in real life, it is not so easy to deal with him. Even if he is able to produce energy, Kwon's weapon could not withstand it. Of course, Jinsu could ask that man if he met him, but would they meet again? While the guy was thinking, the monitor showed that he had arrived at his destination. Once home, Jinsu decided to check something. He rummaged through the screen and found the Orc commander's helmet. The helmet has plus 110 or more to the ability to command while wearing it, and plus 5,000 to resistance to enemies that are stronger. Kwon was surprised that this helmet had two options, and together with 3 stones, it wouldn't be bad. Jinsu inspected the weapon. Basilisk Molar, A rank. It was a dagger that dealt plus 150 poison damage per second for 3 minutes. Kwon asked the ball, calling it a volleyball, if he knew where to get a weapon. Char replied that he couldn't give a good weapon, but he could recommend an excellent dungeon. The ball gave the guy maps of the locations and asked him what he thought about it. Kwon replied that the good places had most likely already been emptied by other guilds and there was hardly anything left. Char replied to Kwon that there was no need to worry about other guilds, since only he could enter this dungeon. Jinsu asked what the ball meant by this, and he replied that once a day it would open a dungeon for the guy, and he needed to go as far as his abilities allowed. Kwon suggested that the further he went, the stronger the monsters would be, and the orb responded that there was no point in having a personal dungeon if it was too weak or too strong. The guy agreed that it made sense and suggested giving it a try. Meanwhile, Da-young's colleague heard a scream from her office and looked in to ask if everything was okay. She replied that everything was fine and the colleague offered her something to eat and take a break. But suddenly someone pushed him from behind. It was Park Sang-hyuk who came to inquire about the raid on the Daejeon industrial area. He heard that it was Daeon who started this crazy raid, and he told her to give him a reason that could convince him to agree to it. The girl replied that 3 days ago the border had been breached, and a platoon of the army and 5 hunters who were watching the border had been killed at dawn. Park realized that they had a reason to assemble an attack squad, and Da-young said that Kang Yuhua, who was sent to Europe, would also join. Pak was angered by this. Kang Yuhua was the first in the ranking of the Korean branch. She was a tank nicknamed Spear of the Korean Peninsula. She became a hunter at 15, closed 300 dungeons, and was a real monster who rose to the #1 spot in Korea. However, one day she left the country and never returned. Da-young said that the branch manager himself contacted Yuhua, and Park replied that he was just mentally ill and had been talking to a ghost. Da-young asked Sang-hyuk if he would participate in the raid. He replied that he had no choice, so he would go too. At this time, Lee Sang-yoon, Jinsu, and Lee Yuna were walking in an alley in Dongdaemun. They were looking for a building, and Sang-yoon soon saw it. They met a salesman there who recognized him and Lee Yuna, but he saw Kwon for the first time. Sang-yoon said that Jinsu would like to get rid of the items and buy some weapons at the same time. The man in the hat said they were in the right place because he was a store owner named Bailson. And then he asked what the guy wanted to sell, and Kwon put the orc leader's helmet on the table. Bailson turned on the definition function on his monocle and began to examine the qualities of the helmet. The shop owner determined that it was quite an expensive item and was willing to pay 13 million won for it. In response, Jinsu asked to look at the list of daggers for the same price. The boy looked at it for a while, and Bailson thought he was unhappy about something. Kwon said he needed a weapon with better stats, but he didn't have enough money right now. Bailson said he could find a way out of this, but Yuna interrupted him, realizing that he wanted to drag Kwon into the competition. She said that Jinsu had only recently become a hunter and was still a complete noob, and the seller said that he could handle it. Kwon asked what was required of him, and Bailson said that he needed to take part in a one-on-one hunter battle, and he agrees to pay 10 times more for the item if the guy wins. Jinsu decided to take a chance, and the seller invited him to go into another room. Bailson not only speculated on item deals, he also created an underground coliseum and made money on fights between hunters. Yuna guessed that he was going to palm off some strongman on Kwon, and the seller replied that for tenfold payment, you should be prepared for that. But the girl did not calm down, and Bailson said that if they were so worried, they could go into the arena 3-on-3 and everything would end as soon as they won. Yuna thought this was a good idea, and the seller suggested getting started right away. However, Jinsu still guessed that something was fishy here. And when they entered the hall, they saw an entire arena underground. Yuna also continued to feel something suspicious, and then she saw that the opponents would be the guys from the Berserker Guild. They just grinned at her, and the girl, angry, shouted that she would break their necks right now. Aunt Bailson entered the arena and announced the start of the first game. The seller introduced the first opponent in the game, Song Jin from the Berserker Guild, and his opponent was Lee Yuna. The hunters entered the arena. They were equally strong, but the spectators still placed bets. While there was still time left before the end of the betting, Sun walked around and egged on his opponent. The girl replied that he wanted to die so much that he had lost his mind. The first match was given 5 minutes. The fight began, and Jin advised to give up immediately. But Yuna didn't take his words seriously and prepared to attack him. And he, in turn, planned to deprive her of her magical staff. Sun attacked first and was sure that victory was his. But Yuna immediately used the ability Flicker, and he was thrown back. This time the girl teased him, but Jin did not give up and wanted to attack her again. However, this time Sun was engulfed in water. He could not hold on and flew out of the ring. Lee Yuna was declared the winner, and Bailson began to announce the next opponent. The girl turned around and saw a huge man in armor who was familiar to her. While Yuna was arguing, the seller introduced the audience to his opponent, the head of the Berserker Guild, Park Irion. The stakes began to rise, and Yuna understood that the opponent was really very strong because they were mainly betting on him. Pak told Yuna that he didn't know they would be rivals, but it was time to get started. The gong sounded, and Yuna used the ability Aqua Armor and then Aqua Ball, but all of this was easily repelled by Iren. Yuna still wanted to win, and she encased her opponent in a piece of ice using Flicker. But almost immediately, the ice shattered into small pieces, and Pa said that this would not work against him. Then the girl used the blast wave line formation, and large spiky pieces of ice rained down on Irina. But it didn't work either. Puck broke the ice that had enveloped him again. And he confessed to her that magic didn't work on his body. Yuna couldn't believe that this was possible and used the Frost Tree ability, slamming the staff onto the floor. A block of ice appeared in front of Pak, but he shouted that it was still not enough and rushed to chop the ice. The girl couldn't believe that her opponent had managed to do this. And when he had finished, he pointed his sword at her. Yuna had no choice but to admit defeat, and this time Irina was declared the winner. Yuna approached Jinsu and asked him for forgiveness for failing. It seemed like the battle was over with her defeat because Lee Sang-yoon and Kwon Jinsu were not his opponents at all. But Kwon suddenly said that it was his turn. Yuna told him that he was crazy, and he only asked her to strengthen his weapon. The girl strengthened his dagger, and for 5 minutes the weapon's durability increased threefold. Jinsu thanked her and went into the arena. Irion was surprised that such a young opponent came to him. Bailson announced the start of the third match. The spectators began to place bets, but surprisingly, almost everyone was now betting on Kwon. The seller even encouraged them by saying that those who bet on Jinsu would become rich. Suddenly, Kwon asked Bailson if he could also make a bet of 3 stones and 30 million won. The seller replied that this was usually against the rules, but today he would make an exception. The fight began, and Irene immediately rushed at Kwon, saying that if he came here to gain experience, he chose the wrong opponent. And as soon as Park swung his sword, Jinsu immediately blocked his attack and said that he was worried that the match might end quickly. Irion decided to go all out and attack the guy again, but no matter how hard he tried, Kwon fought off his attacks with his knife. Yuna watched the fight and couldn't believe that Jinsu was actually so capable. Pak was so furious that he was engulfed in flames and shouted that he would kill Kwon, but he only grinned and advised him to try. And then the guy started using the cooling to put out Irina's fire, but he only got angrier. The brute approached Jinsu, trying to grab him, but he again used the power of the dagger and threw his opponent away. Puck flew to the side, dropping his sword, and then he realized that this guy was none other than the famous unknown. Even the audience realized that it was the unknown from the Lost City, and he defeated Park Ir-young. Almost in a fit, Bailson declared Kwon Jinsu the winner because this seller also bet 500 million. Lee Yuna was surprised when she found out that unknown was Jinsu and asked him why he hid it. And the guy just replied that they didn't ask. At that moment, the seller approached them. Kwon immediately asked him about the promise, and he reluctantly laid 4 daggers on the table for him. However, the status of these daggers could not be determined, and Bailson said that they were all B rank and above, and each was worth over 100 million. Then the seller added that it would be boring if Kwon just took one and offered a bet. He explained that the winner would be the one who chose the weapon of the highest rank, and Kwon asked what he would get if he won. Baleson said that he would give the chosen dagger, as well as a subspace inventory in which magical stones could be placed. Then the guy asked what would happen if he lost, and the seller replied that then Kwon would have to give up the stones. Jinsu's friends found this suspicious and asked him not to agree. Kwon touched one of the daggers, and it showed that his level was average, and that he had few qualities in general. The boy was convinced that there was a trap in the dispute, and Baleson had the ability of a goblin merchant. Jinsu asked the salesman if the method of selection was important, and he replied that it was up to Kwon's discretion. The guy waved his hand around for a bit and then picked one out. And Baleson just laughed that out of all of them, only this dagger was A rank. Jinsu continued to examine, and the next dagger simply dissolved in his hand. Kwon moved on to the next one and said that he didn't fit either, and the salesman grabbed the dagger and asked what the guy was doing. The boy replied that he was only trying to find the right one, but Baleson knew that it was the right dagger and admitted that he had lost. Kwon asked the seller to identify the dagger, and he told him all the privileges of this weapon. It was a skin cutter, A rank, worth 1,020,000,000 won. Its attack power was 2,200, forged by the flames of a salamander. The seller also put the magic stones in the subspace inventory and told him how to activate it. With the receipt of the inventory, the bonus quest for Kwon was completed, and the guy received another 100 points on top of everything. Jinsu said goodbye to his comrades and went straight to the hospital to visit his sister. The main thing for him now was that she woke up. He wanted nothing more. Returning home, Kwon saw that the ball had prepared another quest for him. Char also said that if Kwon goes inside, he will have to make a choice every moment. But the guy's life already consisted of a series of endless choices, and so he took a step forward. Jinsu came out near a huge old tower whose roof almost touched the sky. This was the Tower of Origins and Kwon's personal dungeon that needed to be cleared. On top of that, it started raining, and then he said, "Apple," and a ball appeared in front of him. Jinsu remembered his words that he was the only one who could enter here. And when the ball confirmed this, Kwon asked it who all those people were that were there. People immediately started approaching the guy and asking him to give them food. Kwon was given 3 minutes to complete this task and make a choice. Go hunting straight to the tower or save the people. Jinsu opened the inventory, and there was a lot of food there, which he immediately gave to the people. People began to thank him and call him a magician, as if they knew nothing. One girl got a can of food, and she didn't know how to open it. Kwon helped her, and she was very surprised that there was meat in the can and it was edible. Jinsu began to ask out loud where he was, and then an old man approached him. The man introduced himself as the village elder and then fell at the boy's feet, saying that if he left them, they would die. Kwon was immediately asked whether he was ready to become the master of the village, and the answer was yes or no. However, Jinsu could not continue to support them as he felt that few people could accept such a task. And the guy decided to make a different choice from the others and told people that he would help them. So Kwon became the owner of the poor village Bale with a population of 43 people and asked the ball if he had done the right thing. Char replied that it depended on what he did in the future. But now Jinsu had more options than just getting over the tower. Kwon was given a special task. He had to bring the village to prosperity in 300 days, for which he would receive a worthy reward. But first, the guy decided to inspect the tower, which was unrealistically high. Kwon stood in front of the locked gates and didn't know how to get inside. Then another message appeared asking to enter the tower. The guy pressed yes, and the gates started to open, and behind them was a blue light. This tower had 100 floors, and Kwon was given the right to climb by defending each floor. As soon as Jinsu entered, it became dark inside, and the growling of a monster was heard. Then the guy used the ability Observation. Now Kwon had to fight an eagle mouse, which had an F difficulty and high speed, but was weak to light. Jinsu pushed the door to open wider, which helped him defeat the monster. However, after that, another mouse appeared. With a difficulty level of E+, it was 3 times stronger, but its lower abdomen was not covered with impenetrable skin. Jinsu took out his dagger and prepared to pierce the monster's stomach with it, but it suddenly flew up from its place. The mouse circled above the guy, and he tried several times to hit its weak spot. And yet he managed to do it, and the huge bat fell to the floor. Kwon opened the status window and saw his rewards. 7 magic stones, 500 dri of sapphire eagle mouse powder, and 1 soul. Jinsu immediately asked the ball what the souls he received every time he killed a boss monster meant. The ball replied that only worthy creatures possess souls, and he, as the killer of these creatures, receives the right to own them. Quan asked what was good about collecting souls, and the orb said that it would increase the speed at which his abilities would develop. However, boss monsters are not found on the road, and Jinsu asked how many of them he needs to catch to develop the ability. An apple replied that his target, possessing a soul, does not necessarily have to be only monsters. The ball pointed out that people were as valuable as monsters, and there were a lot of them. Quan asked for clarification as to whether the ball was suggesting that he kill people, and he replied that he was not forcing him to do anything, but was only saying that there was another way. The guy was a little shocked by this turn of events and decided to return from the dungeon. But as soon as Jinsu crossed the threshold of the portal, he saw that his entire room was destroyed. At first, the guy thought it was a thief, but then he realized that this thief was not targeting the property. On the nightstand, Quan noticed a piece of paper with a phone number, which the guy immediately called and started yelling at them. Jinsu began to ask why they did this, because it was definitely not for money. The voice on the other end of the line said that it was difficult to meet Quan and introduced himself as Jang Jae-hyuk, Jang Woo-hyuk's older brother. Quan shouted back that it was the bastard's own fault because he was going to kill the students to catch the monsters. He also added that if Jae-hyuk was going to protect him because of the same blood, then they had nothing more to talk about. And Chan told him to come tomorrow at 1 o'clock to the free server of the Lost City, where he would be waiting for him. Quan asked why he should listen to him, and he teased that Unknown wanted to avoid battle. Finally, Jae-hyuk said that Jin-soo had better show up if he wanted to save Kwon Soo-ah. Char told Quan that it was a trap, although the guy knew it himself. But Jin-soo replied that he had to go anyway, and was confident that a loser like Chang would not be able to deprive him of anything. Quan put on a virtual reality helmet and entered the Lost City. Jin-soo immediately received a message. It was an invitation to a game from Mr. Black Butterfly. The guy realized that it was from Jae-hyuk and clicked accept, but he was in an aggressive mood. Soon, Quan arrived at his destination, where several hunters had already gathered. Jae-hyuk teased him again that he came and didn't even try to run away. Jin-soo reminded him that the fight was supposed to be one-on-one, and he replied that he had to lie to lure him here. To this, Quan said that he and that bastard were equals in terms of dirty tricks. Here, Sergeant Park decided to come to Chan's defense and attacked Jin-soo with insults. They began to have a verbal altercation, and Quan suggested that they fight one-on-one, saying that Park did not know who he was going to. The sergeant replied that he didn't care even if he was the unknown, and Jin-soo confirmed that he was the unknown. Meanwhile, a system warning about infection by an unknown virus appeared, and it will be forcibly disabled. All the hunters were confused, and then a new message about the unsuccessful completion arrived, and the module of forced launch of the game was activated, which will start in 1 minute. And Jae-hyuk said that the protection of the Kang Company is excellent, that even the system cannot be taken under control, and therefore he had to launch a virus. And Kwon Chan said that if he wanted to get out of here alive, he would have to stay in the final squad. The connection began, and they found themselves in the location, New York, which was the most difficult in the Lost City. Jin-soo decided that he needed to get weapons and provisions first. He soon received iron armor and subspace equipment. In addition, leather boots that speed up movement, a chipped longsword, and 2 traps. And then the guy saw that a building nearby exploded, and he heard that someone was fighting there. Someone fired through a hole in the wall, and the guy noticed a shooter on the neighboring roof. Afterwards, a message was heard that the surviving players were asked to move to safe zones within 3 minutes. This was the end of the first round. But at the same time, several armed men were already breaking into the building where Kwon was. They immediately started shooting in different directions and throwing grenades, and then one shouted that they needed to find and take a photo of the body. One of them came across some thread, and as soon as he pulled, there was a blinding explosion. Immediately after this, Jin-soo jumped out of hiding and began to beat everyone with a bat, leaving only one to deliver the message. At this time, from the other side of the street in Kwona, someone had already launched an arrow, shouting that he had caught it. But this man was too confident, as Jin-soo was already jumping towards him from the other side. And the next thing the shooter felt was a powerful blow from a bat to his jaw. After some time, one of the attacking fighters woke up, and Kwon immediately began to interrogate him about why he attacked. The fighter replied that he had been ordered to do so by a guy they had encountered in the waiting room and had promised to save him if he killed Kwon. At this time, manager Daeon noticed that the Korean server of the Lost City had been hacked. She looked at the extent of the damage and saw that the number of victims had exceeded 100 in 10 minutes. The restoration could not be delayed, as even more people would die. And the media got wind of something and started flooding us with questions. Having given the commands, the girl tried to find out something herself. She saw that Jinsu was in New York at the time. Dion immediately called a specialist and asked him to hack the system, but he replied that it was almost impossible due to the implanted virus. But the girl demanded that he do everything possible, and at the same time, she was very worried about Kwon. 5 minutes later, the specialist called back and said that he had saved the communication channel, and Dion told him to connect her. A Jinsu, having taken refuge near the other people, noticed that a private channel had opened, which was usually used to communicate with the outside world in the waiting room. Kwon first thought it was a trap, but then he also thought that Chan didn't need this since he had already taken over the entire system. When the boy answered, he heard Dayoung's voice asking if he was okay, and Jinsu replied that he was alive. He didn't kill the people who attacked him because his real enemies were Jang Jae-hyuk and his gang. Meanwhile, Chang was asking his people whether the cleanup had been successful. Jinsu's doing... But Chan demanded proof, and the sergeant replied that there was so much of it that only a lunatic would think that Kwon hadn't done it. Suddenly, they noticed a small plane, and Jae-hyuk ordered Park to double-check everything because they had to block everything. There was only one reason why a plane would be seen flying over the lost city. It was to drop supplies. The sergeant immediately recognized the category, S-rank equipment, and the location of the cargo drop 8 kilometers the southeast of them. Jae-hyuk couldn't let Kwon get his hands on the S-rank equipment. Chang left his men where they were and went to deal with the cargo himself. Soon Chan was already at the drop site, but he didn't yet know what to do if someone suddenly got there earlier. And then Jinsu came out to him and said that judging by his greed, Chan was definitely of the same blood as that bastard. And Jae-hyuk realized that it was Kwon who caused the cargo to be dropped, and he replied that it could be said that way. Chang asked how Kwon managed to hack the system, and he replied that he simply set it up to throw dust in the eyes of some idiot. Jae-hyuk looked into the box and saw that there was only trash in there, and he became even more angry at Jinsu. And Kwon replied that it was thanks to that trash that Chan was here, to which Jae-hyuk said that the pain management was still under his control. Jinsu in turn said that this problem had already been solved. Chang began to call his subordinates, but they did not listen. The unknown person also said that he is not the only one who can recruit players. And now all of Chan's subordinates have been taken prisoner, and soon the system will also fall into the hands of Jinsu. All this time, Jae-hyuk only snapped at Kwon, but in the end, he decided on an emergency method and pressed the button. A message immediately appeared that monsters were appearing in all areas of the map. Jinsu couldn't believe that Chan was willing to kill his entire team, and he replied that those idiots were no use anyway. Kwon was informed via radio that the virus was already being eliminated using the secret code received from the captives, but he needed to hold out for another 10 minutes. But during this time, a portal opened on the street where Jinsu was, and many monsters crawled out of it. Apple for help, and as soon as the ball appeared to him, the guy began to ask for an exchange of points. Char saw that the situation was really serious and gave Jinsu the choice of one of 4 cards. Kwon chose the hidden card and received the skill Hephaestus's Forge, and then immediately used it. A large number of hammers flew towards the monsters, but the guy also armed himself with Tutankhamun's dagger. Jinsu was ready to fight the monsters and launched an active skill, then began to pounce on them. The guy sometimes barely had time to slip under their paws and strike. At the end, the strongest ones remained, one of whom was already raising his paw over Kwon, and the guy immediately used the reflection skill. Thousands of thin rays began to break through from the monster's body, and then he fell to the ground motionless. And while Jinsu was fighting the monsters, Jang Jae-hyuk was hiding around the corner the whole time. There were still monsters, however, and here the prepared box of knives came in handy. Kwon used the skill throwing, and a huge amount of cutting weapons flew towards the monsters. Many of them were badly injured and collided with buildings, exploding along with them. There was still a little time left. Chan decided to use this chance for himself, and immediately jumped out of hiding to Jinsu while he was exhausted. Chan didn't care about the monsters. His desire was to kill Kwon, and he was almost touching him with his feet. But the boy immediately disappeared. He quickly moved, and Chan landed on the floor. Kwon told Chan that even a goblin couldn't be killed that way, and Jae-hyuk became even more angry. However, Chan missed again and instead received a hard blow to the face from Kwon's sneakers. Jae-hyuk continued to attack the guy, but each time he managed to avoid the blows. In Chan's final attack, Kwon jumped high into the air and launched his dagger at his opponent. Jae-hyuk tried to block the dagger with his sword, but the sword was cut into pieces. The blade of the dagger itself reached its target and pierced the heart of the chairman's son. And in the hunter's branch on the third floor, a meeting was taking place. Chairman Chil, the group demanded that Kwon Jin-soo be handed over to them. But Im Da-young and his boss weren't going to do that, even though that guy had dealt with 2 gentlemen from Chil. Group. The girl claimed that it was Jin-soo who was able to correct the current situation, and those 2 had already decided everything for themselves. Da-young really hoped that the branch manager would support her, and he said that Kwon Jin-soo is a ranker who is part of their ranks. And then he added that they would never hand him over, and Chil groups can only return when they have prepared compelling arguments. Employee Chil Grup said that they were making a mistake and that becoming enemies because of some hunter was stupid. Dayon shouted at him to be careful with his words, but the employee continued that he had only told the truth. He also added that without support and funding, she and her boss would not be in their positions now. And the head of the branch grabbed all the papers and threw them in the employee's face, saying that they were not in this position because of them. The chairman asked the head to calm down and then said that they were ready to fulfill any demand of the branch if they handed over Jin-soo to them. But the head stood his ground, and the chairman did not stop and said that he had lost 2 sons, and therefore he did not give a damn about the branch. Chan no longer asked. He threatened that if they didn't hand over Jin-soo to him, he would easily arrange monsters and dungeons for them. The branch manager knew that this man was not joking, and Da-young told the boss that Jin-soo believed them and joined, and they could not betray him. Then the leader said that no matter what results today's choice leads to, he will never betray his comrades. 3 days later, Kwon sat at home and thought that nothing had changed. Boy, of course I didn't think it would ruin Chil Group, but still somehow too much. Someone behind him asked him not to worry. Kwon turned around and saw a ball with a mouth. In any case, this fight made Jin-soo understand what he really lacked. The biggest problem was the exchange of points and the change in the law of causality. And ultimately, in order to fully utilize his ability, he needed to increase his mana capacity to the limit. Although it was possible to reduce mana consumption by leveling up or increase its amount with special items. But the problem was that it was not so easy to implement. And then the ball said that there was a third way. Kwon thought that the ball could read his thoughts, and then he remembered that he had indeed collected a lot of things in these 3 days. Jin-soo saw that he had already collected 20 souls, and he realized that because of this, he no longer got tired. And Kwon tried to imagine what would happen to him if he collected 100 souls. Then Lee Yuna called him. In a slightly displeased voice, the girl asked if he was kidding. Kwon asked her to speak more calmly, and then admitted that he was wrong and said that he would not do it again. But the girl replied that all this was just words, and Jin-soo offered to treat her to something tasty. The girl replied that it wasn't a bad idea, but she had one more request for Kwon. Yuna said that she received a task for the guild, it was of the right scope, and she was not at ease going only with them. The guy assumed that she was asking him to go with them, and Lee, praising him for his quick thinking, told him about the location. It was located in the ancient fortress of Gangwon-do, and their target was the orcs that were in its territory. The orcs were currently occupying the demilitarized zone. Yuna also said that these orcs don't look weak. They bypassed the dungeon and went straight to the ancient fortress. In 2 days, 2 more guilds were supposed to join theirs, and Yuna hoped that Jin-soo would arrive by then. Kwon agreed and said that they would see each other in 2 days and decided to focus on leveling up for now. The guy called Apple and asked him to open the passage to the Tower of Origins. At this time, in the conference room, the head of the Hwarang Guild, Choi Moo-han, was discussing one of Jin-soo's abilities and said that such an ability could only belong to a ranker. Choi also asked his hunter if this was the same hunter he was talking about, and Baek Jin-ho confirmed. The leader continued by saying that he heard that this hunter had made a contract with the hunter branch. And Jin-ho replied that the contract did not solve anything, and it could always be terminated if a penalty was paid. When Choi asked how much money was needed, the hunter said that 500 billion would be enough. The chairman agreed to this, and although Baek did not understand why he was willing to pay such a sum, Choi said that Jin-soo should be brought to him at any cost. Kwon Jin-soo had already reached the 37th floor of the Tower of Origins, and there he fought with a huge worm. The guy chopped off the head of a monster with a huge number of sharp teeth in several rows. However, after this, instead of 1 worm, 2 appeared, and this happened several times. But Kwon dealt with them. During the battle, the last worm managed to swallow Jin-soo. But the guy cut his stomach from the inside and thus finished off the monster. Now, all that was left was to finish off the boss, because that was the only way he could feed the villagers. The boss wasn't just a huge worm, he also had spikes all over his body. For the battle, Jinsu requested an exchange of points, and immediately a ball appeared, which was a little unhappy that it was called to such a pigsty. But Quan wanted to get it over with quickly and requested a random card. The ball did not sleep to argue and prepared a one-time random exchange for the hunter. Jinsu received a unique ability, Atrophy, which slowed down the enemy's attack and movement speed. This helped Quan considerably, but the monster still proved too strong. As the boss fell and Jinsu was about to jump on him to finish the job, he stuck out a large spike on his tail. But the guy deftly dodged it so as not to get caught and tried to get to the worm's belly. After several precise dagger strikes, the boss monster was defeated. After that, Quan received 50 million won and a ring of pitch darkness and more magic stones. Jinsu wondered who would eat the worm meat, but he decided to call it a day. The ball asked about the next floor, and Quan replied that not now, and the inventory was already full. And the ball offered to open a passage to the village. As soon as the boy crossed over there, the village elder immediately approached him. Jinsu honestly told him that when the old man was so close to him, he didn't feel comfortable. The headman considered these words cruel, but then said that winter was coming soon, and many houses did not even have windows. The old man said that he himself had already wintered there a couple of times, but he felt sorry for the children, and he would be very grateful if Jinsu could build new houses. The boy replied that he would soon resolve this issue, but for now he told the headman to go and set the table. Afterwards, Quan went to think about what to do next with the village, and a little later it occurred to him to put his man in an important post. The boy understood that in the future the village would grow, and if it became a country, then Jinsu would establish a dictatorship. Then Quan pressed the build button on the panel, but saw that 12 buildings would require 240 stones. This seemed expensive to him. But there was nothing to be done, because if he didn't build it, they wouldn't feed him. And Jinsu pressed confirm. As soon as Quan finished with this, the headman ran up to him and said that the food was ready. During the meal, Jinsu told the old man that he had seen an old mine near them and asked if it was abandoned. Mithril E, which has a blue tint, was mined there. And Quan asked why they stopped mining, because they could have sold it and lived in luxury. The old man replied that they were happy to continue, but they had no equipment and the area was full of monsters. Jinsu asked if they could continue mining if they eliminated the monsters. And when the headman answered that yes, the boy began to think that it would be good to have more modern equipment. After leaving the Tower of Origins, Quan went to Balison's shop, and the shopkeeper asked the guy what he came for. Quan said that he had accumulated a lot of goods for exchange and laid out several items on the table. Balison was a little shocked that the guy managed to get all this, especially the meat of the underground worm. The salesman said that the Scylla Hotel needed a huge amount of supplies, and this meat would be just right, and the price had gone up. The guy still couldn't believe that someone was eating it, and in a hotel at that. The seller offered 5 million won per kilogram for it. For everything, Balison offered 1,050 million won, and Jinsu said he had something else. Quan took out the ring of pitch darkness and asked for an appraisal. The seller was amazed. Balison determined that it was an artifact with an active skill and could block the vision of a selected target for 1 minute, with a recharge time of 12 hours. The seller thought that with such a ring, he could cover the entire loss, and Quan said that he would buy it for a maximum of 3 billion won. But the guy found it suspicious that Balison was looking around and decided to go and have the ring appraised elsewhere. And as soon as Quan turned around, the salesman shouted 5 billion at him. Then Jinsu told him to transfer the entire amount to his account and wanted to buy a couple more things. Quan needed 300-man armor, a mining drill, and ore prospecting and blasting scrolls. Listening to the guy, Balison realized that he had found a gold mine, and then he offered to invest in the business too. To this, Jinsu replied that the seller should invest about 30 billion as an advance payment and also take care of the equipment. Quan also said that after Balison might get a couple of pieces of mithril. A little later, Jinsu heard the village chief calling him. Opening his eyes, he remembered that he had fallen asleep in the village. The old man said that he had already prepared people who would do the mining. All that was left was to deal with the monsters. The boy understood that the villagers themselves would not be able to sort this out, so he had to solve it himself. Quan told the headman that he would handle the monsters himself and let the rest practice operating the equipment. When the old man left, Jinsu asked Apple to open the passage for him to return. Char asked if the boy was going to catch orcs. Kwon said what was needed and then asked if it could be done in a day. And the ball replied that if Jinsu could eliminate the orc tribe in a day, he would receive a good reward. The guy thought it was suspicious, but he had to get through by any means necessary. Kwon agreed, but first asked to open the passage to the house. As soon as Jinsu took a shower at home, Yuna texted him that she was already at his house. When the guy left the house, he saw a yellow sports car with Yuna behind the wheel. The girl said that this car would get there in no time. The guy sat down and reminded her of her words about the large guilds also taking part. Yuna replied that hunters from 3 guilds were participating, and Hunter Bae-doojin from the Broken Arrow Guild would lead the raid. Then the girl said that he already knew Sun Jin, and that Park Hee-yeon from the Trial Guild would also be with them. The guy calculated that 1 A-rank hunter, B-rank hunters, a shock force of 100 people, and army support was not a bad composition. The girl confirmed that it was so much so that the 2 of them might not have to do anything. Meanwhile, at headquarters, contact was lost with the transport train of the Quartermaster Detachment and the platoon of the search team of the 22nd Division, which was guarding them. They also learned that the stronghold at Point C-18 had been destroyed and all 6 D-rank hunters had been killed. They also received a request for reinforcements from Hunter Pak Kyong, who had infiltrated Point B6. Park was ambushed and in a very dangerous situation, and one of the hunters, Han Yeon-soo, suggested asking the guild for help. He also suggested that at this rate, the shock force would be completely destroyed. The commander just yelled at him because they were fighting orcs and asking for help would be a disgrace, and the hunter said that orcs are not all ordinary. About half of the hunters took the raid as a walk, but it was worth lifting the lid to see a real hell inside. In the first battle, the 3rd shock force was completely destroyed, and on the way to Michiryong, communication with 2 battalions of the 56th Regiment was lost. Eventually, the orc guerrilla force even attacked the supply route, and the raid turned into a dirty fight. The commander then recalled Han's words that the huntress Lee Yuna was supposed to arrive today, and he replied that she would be there soon. On the orders of the commander, Yeon-soo called Yuna back to find out where she was at the moment. The girl replied that she was almost there. Han said that there was a lot of work for her, and she was glad that it was not in vain that she dragged Jinsu along with her. When Han asked who she meant, Yuna reminded him that she had contacted a talented hunter. And then it dawned on Han that she was going to take the hunter Kwon Jinsu with her, and he thought that would be quite enough. Half an hour later, Yuna and Jinsu arrived at the scene and saw that everything was more serious than they had expected. The guy, of course, thought that Apple would not give him an easy task. Yuna didn't expect it either, and Kwon said they should be careful. It didn't look like a mass-produced weapon, more like a barrage of projectiles. The girl said that it would be difficult for her to fight at full strength in such a mountainous area. And then the hunter who had called her came to meet her. She reminded him that he had promised that there would only be a couple of orcs, but that was completely different from what he had said. Young-soo replied that they thought so too, and Yuna said that it would cost 300 million. At headquarters, the commander said that they needed to attack again with the remaining forces. And then Jinsu answered him, saying that this speech sounded like the words of a madman. And then he added that since they were already scattered, they needed to ask for reinforcements, but instead he was getting ready to fight again. The commander got angry and said that he was in command here and that he also made the decisions. And Kwon replied that if the raid had come to this, it would have been worth taming his temper, and called the commander an amazing stubborn man. However, the guy then added that since he was in charge here, he could do as he said, but he might regret it later. When they all arrived at the place, Han Yeon-soo confirmed that there were 2 orcs at the entrance, and he thought they were smart. The commander said that there was only one entrance to the cave, and defense was good. But if you got stuck inside, there would be nowhere to retreat, and then asked if Khan had figured out who the leader was. The hunter replied that it was a large orc in a helmet and had entered the cave not long ago, and the commander gave the command to begin the hunt. The orcs at the cave noticed the people approaching them and prepared to kill them. However, the people quickly defeated them, and the commander gave the order to move as quietly as possible. It was so dark in the cave that it seemed like a ghost was about to jump out or they would be suddenly attacked. Jinsu saw that these hunters were not of a low level, but at the same time, they were very scared of something. Then Kwon thought that if he could use the study skill on monsters, then maybe it would work on people too, and decided to give it a try. He first studied Han Yeon-soo, who had a unique ability called Windshield. but there was more information about him that cost 100 points, and Kwon thought that such information might be useful. Jinsu paid and saw that the hunter Han Yonsu would die during this raid. Meanwhile, the people approached another cave with orcs, and the commander ordered to begin the attack. Everyone took out their weapons, and the fight began. Yuna also used her lightning strike skill. Many orcs were immediately fried, and the commander ordered to drive them inside and kill them all. Meanwhile, something was bothering Kwon. Before entering, he felt an unknown mana that could not belong to low-level orcs. The guy also thought that if the owner of the mana came onto the scene, the situation could change dramatically, and he tried to understand what was going on. Then Kwona called Yun and said that the cave was changing. The boy turned around and saw that she was right. The cave filled with green light, stones fell from the ceiling, and a passage opened. The commander did not believe that there could be an entrance to a dungeon in such a place, and did not understand why this happened. Then the hunters received a message that they had entered a hidden dungeon and they had almost 12 hours. Additionally, if they fail to eliminate the boss and escape, they will remain trapped in the dungeon forever. Jinsu asked the commander what he had found, but he said it was nothing important. But the guy didn't agree, because if the entrance opened, then the conditions of a hidden dungeon should have appeared. And the commander told Kwon all the restrictions that were received in the message. Kwon said that the positions of the mages needed to be changed, and the hunters also needed to be reorganized. But the commander reminded him that he was in command here, and Jinsu's popularity did not give him the right to throw around orders here. Kwon replied that he was only advising on how to avoid destruction, but the commander replied that he already had both advisors and combat experience in the hidden dungeon. And Jinsu replied that in that case, he would act alone. Yuna, who heard all this, asked the guy why he reacted so rudely, and Kwon answered her that a stupid allied commander is much more terrible than an enemy. Then everyone heard a voice from the portal, who called himself the Great Orc Sorcerer and said that people had invaded his domain, and he would make them pay the price. The caster also cast several spells, and the human's movement speed decreased by 10%, while the orc's combat strength increased by 20%. Kwon asked Yuna if it was possible to quickly dispel the spell. She replied that their shaman had passed the 6th circle and it would take time, at least 10 minutes. The orcs began to attack again. Jinsu asked Yuna to deal with it with the other magicians as soon as possible. The orcs didn't pass by Kwon either and attacked from all sides, and the guy cut them with his dagger. The rest of the hunters stood there and asked the commander what to do, and he thought that if they failed, he would have to answer for everything. He didn't want to let that happen and ordered the mages not to waste mana on blocking the spells, but to light a flame in front. The 2 hunters immediately used the abilities Magic Flower of Light and Firestorm, but then Yuna intervened, asking what they were doing, and the hunters were already using a fire blast. In an instant, the orcs were already lying roasted on the ground, and the commander was rejoicing in his victory. Suddenly, the orcs began to rise, saying that their magic would not work. The commander shouted to continue the attack, but the hunters had already spent all their mana. And then he saw that there were even more orcs, and his next order was to run away from here. The chief orc appeared and asked why they called jokes of this level magic, and then said that he would kill them all without exception. Yuna, standing further away, saw what the orcs were doing to the hunters, and she herself was already prepared for death. But then she realized that she was still alive, and opening her eyes, Yuna saw that Jinsu had put a barrier in front of her and told her to get out immediately. The girl was surprised by what Kwon could do. She identified it as the 7th or even 8th circle. Meanwhile, Jinsu activated the ability of Millenniome and was glad that he had prepared the magic by exchanging points. Kwon repeated to Yuna again to leave and not to worry about him, because he was not here to be caught by some weaklings. The captain and the hunters ran away, and some saw that Kwon remained but did not understand why. When they left, Jinsu decided to go all out. When he saw the orc leader, he knew he wasn't one of them, because he had scanned all the mages. The leader shouted to the orcs to attack Kwon together, and the guy used the Shining Storm ability. Then Jinsu made Hellfire and launched it towards the orcs. The herd of orcs immediately burst into flames, and soon the dead fell to the ground along with their leader. As a reward, Jinsu received a summoner's ring that could activate the summoning of undead soldiers. As soon as the guy took the ring in his hands, skeletons began to crawl out of the ground. Kwon didn't immediately understand what was happening, but then he finally realized that these were undead soldiers. Jinsu thought that it would be inconvenient to have skeletons following him around, and began to think about how he would walk with them. The guy came up with the idea that it would be nice to send them to the village and decided to ask Apple how to do it. The ball immediately appeared and praised Kwon for having already managed to defeat the spellcaster. Jinsu replied that he was lucky with the point exchanges and dealt with them quickly, and then asked to first settle the reward for the quest. Char said that in addition to glasses, Kwon also gets a blue oasis. The guy liked it because now he doesn't have to worry about water. Then Jinsu asked the ball to open a passage to send the skeletons to Bale Village. But the ball said that this was impossible because only Jinsu could enter the tower. Kwon replied that everything was correct, but the village was located outside the tower. And then he added that if the ball doesn't want to, then it doesn't have to, but it won't perform any more missions. And the ball agreed, but said that this was the first and last time. But the ball also said that the skeletons could really scare the residents, and asked Kwon to at least put hoods on them. The guy sent the skeletons in the cloak to the village and asked for a portal to open home for himself, since he thought it would be a waste of money if he went outside. A moment later, Kwon was home. He was pleased that the exchange of points had helped him complete the mission, but it also added a few extra worries. Then it occurred to Jinsu that he could use the undead army to destroy the monsters on the way to the Mithril mine. Kwon remembered the instruction that it was possible to evolve soldiers, but the summoned soldier would not disappear until it was destroyed. This meant that, at first, it would be difficult to deal with the monsters, but the skeletons would improve. But the main thing is that the monsters can be eliminated. Kwon was pleased that there was no longer any need to waste time clearing the area around the mine. And then a message came from Yuna. She asked why he didn't come out because the exit opened after clearing the dungeon. Jinsu told her that he didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and so he immediately teleported home. The girl called back immediately, but something told the guy that it would be better not to pick up the phone. However, he answered, and Yuna started screaming that she had gotten too nervous while waiting at the exit, and he had simply quietly run home. Kwon apologized and said that he didn't run away, but if he had gone outside, it would have been difficult to explain to others what happened. Yuna said that he could at least give her a hint, and then asked Kwon to meet and talk since she had a lot of questions. Jinsu agreed, and the girl remembered that Choi was looking for him. Kwon, the leader of the Hwarang Guild. Yuna said she didn't know what he wanted, but if it was Hwarang, then the answer was obvious. And they must have decided to buy the hotly debated unknown with money. The girl also said that she gave Choi Kwan's number and asked the guy to take the call if anything happened. Soon, Kwan received a call from the head of Mukwan, who introduced himself and said that he knew that Jinsu had once again dealt with the dungeon alone. The guy replied that he was just lucky, and Choi said that luck is also a talent because when they fail, most people answer that they were unlucky. The chief also said that one should be careful when talking about such things on the phone, and then suggested trying it with them. When Kwan asked what he meant, Choi said that the deposit was 30 billion won and the Hwarang Guild would take full responsibility for paying the penalty to the branch. However, Jinsu refused, saying that he had no plans to terminate his contract with the Hunters branch. Mukwan did not give up and said that they had a way to cure his sister, who had fallen ill due to the magical flow. Kwan asked how, and Choi said that among the hunters of their guild, there is a healer. S rank, which is capable of healing Sua Kwan. Jinsu knew that the healers' S ranks are capable of performing miracles, and he agreed because for the sake of his sister, he was ready to accept any conditions. The chief was delighted and said that treating Sua would be their top priority. But then Choi added that the healer had one condition, and that was to obtain 3 fairy tears within a week. Kwan asked where he could get this item, but Mukwan didn't know and said that the guy should find out for himself. Jinsu realized that the fairy's tears could heal his sister and decided to get them, even if he had to turn the whole world upside down. After the phone conversation, Kwan called Apple and asked him what a fairy tear was. The ball didn't know, but he started looking for the answer and soon found that it was a special item in China's restricted area R39. Jinsu asked if it was possible to clear this area alone, and the ball replied that it was impossible. The guy asked why, because if he had the same powerful magic as this time, then maybe it would work. Shah replied that he had no exact information about what was inside the dungeon, but most of the monsters in the forbidden areas were high-class, brutal warriors. You may also encounter monsters that are resistant to physical attacks and elemental magic. Kwan thought it was strange that there was no way, and the ball replied that there was, but to do so, he would need to meet with a woman from the Hunters branch, Im Dayong. Jinsu immediately went there and without delay said that he needed to know something. Dayon said he could have just called, although judging from his personal visit, She realized the problem was not simple. Kwan asked her what she knew about R39, and the girl asked why he needed a restricted area in China. Jinsu replied that there was a remedy that would help Sua. Dayung immediately thought about how he could know about it. The guy kept asking her to tell him at least something that she could help. Dayan replied that this information was top secret, but she was willing to share it if it would help cure his sister. The girl said that now the Chinese government is forming an offensive force with the aim of reclaiming R39, even though this land has taken many lives. Dayan also said that this time they are going to recruit the most famous hunters in the world to eliminate the dungeon. Kwan asked if the request had also been received by the Korean branch. The girl replied that an official request had not yet been received. And the guy started asking how to get into this squad. Dayan said that a large-scale raid was being prepared, so pushing one person would not be a problem. But for this, it would be better for Kwan not to attract attention to himself, and Jinsu promised that he would be careful. The girl also said, although it is not pleasant to say, but if the Chinese side catches him, they will deny everything. Dayan added that many offensive forces were defeated in this area. But at the same time, the girl understood that even if she tried to stop Kwan, it wouldn't work. The guy thanked her and began to say goodbye, but she remembered something else. She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a small device, and gave it to Kwan. Dayan said that it was a multifunctional translator that would come in handy since the party would consist of hunters from all over the world. Jinsu thanked the girl again, and she told him to make sure he returned alive. Before leaving for China, Jinsu moved to the village using the passage. He gave orders to the undead army not to stop fighting the monsters around the Mithril mine. Kwan also warned the village chief about the undead army so that the villagers would not be too scared. After this, the guy returned to the office for a final check. Kwan was given the task of clearing the forbidden area R39, and the reward for this was access to the black shop. Jinsu immediately asked the ball what kind of shop it was. Shar replied that it was a consignment shop that sold all sorts of things, but that was all the information for now. Kwan thought he would find out anyway once he completed the task, but it wasn't the reward he wanted. Jinsu told Apple to open the portal because it was time to go, and the ball opened a portal to China. The guy had to get the fairy tears anyway and went into the portal. The ball followed up by saying that this raid would bring many changes both for Jinsu and for the balance of this world, and then wished him strength. Jinsu came to China in the vicinity of Nanjing during twilight. There he immediately saw many corpses of hunters. Kwan thought the raid had already begun and went to look. And after 500 meters, he saw hunters fighting skeletons. The hunter commander shouted that they had to hold out until the raid leader returned because everyone would die if the formation collapsed. One hunter shouted that there were more skeletons ahead, but she was only angry that there was no end in sight. The commander swung her sword again, using her freezing ability. Many of the skeletons were immediately covered in ice, and then she chopped them into small pieces. The hunters quickly defeated the remaining skeletons, and the commander said it was time to move on. The loot from fallen monsters and broken skeletons was collected by a resource-gathering squad, which Jinsu joined, trying to behave carefully so as not to stand out. The guy considered this an ideal opportunity to infiltrate the raid unnoticed. Suddenly, one of the group told Kwan that he hadn't seen him before, and he replied that he was new and had just joined today. And then this guy said that he would explain to Jinsu that when the hunt is over, the resource-gathering squad comes into play. First, Team A searches the monster corpses and collects magic stones and items. Then Team B sorts them by type, and Team C delivers them back to camp. And Jinsu asked what he should do. The man gave him a backpack and told him to put everything he found in it. Kwan decided that while he was doing this, he would scout out the situation, and then the man told him to try hard, because the raid would last at least 2 weeks. The man also said that this time was still not enough to catch the Lich, and Jinsu guessed that the Lich was the boss of this place. Kwan also realized from the large number of broken skeletons that this was like a necromancer's dungeon, and it looked like it wouldn't be easy. But Jinsu needed to obtain 3 fairy tears, one for healing, the other as payment. Before the guy could finish his thought, there was a bright flash nearby. The man immediately shouted that they were monsters. The rest of the workers were worried about how the monsters could get here, but they tried to calm themselves down by saying that the hunters were nearby and would stop them. While the people were whispering, Kwan took out his dagger and prepared to fight off the monsters. Suddenly, a lot of blue crystals appeared in front of them, which even impressed people. And then a girl appeared. She started asking the workers if they were planning their death here. It was Yan. Seolhwa is from the Sky Demon Guild and was the second leader of the S rank raid. All the workers bowed to her except Jinsu, and she walked up to him and asked who he was. The man immediately whispered to Kwon to bow, and Yeon asked if his back was made of wood. Jinsu replied that he didn't think it was necessary, which angered the leader. Kwon continued that this was not a meeting with the emperor, and he did not understand why he had to bow. Yeon called him an upstart and ordered him to bow immediately, pointing her sword at him. Suddenly, there was a flash nearby, and the leader told Kwon that he was lucky and that he would answer for the crime later. Seolhwa immediately headed towards the flash, and the man began asking Jinsu why he was arguing. The man also told Kwon who she was and asked him to be careful, because if he made a mistake, they would all die here. The guy thought it was ridiculous, and all the strong hunters around were just rabble, regardless of the country. That same night, at dinner in the detachment, Kwon honestly said that the provisions were too meager, and he prepared dinner from what he took with him. Jinsu invited everyone to join in, and everyone later praised his food. The two hunters who returned noticed this and began to ask what was going on. The male manager almost choked on their sudden appearance, and the hunters began to be cheeky, saying that they had laid their hands on the provisions, but the man said that they had not touched the supplies. The hunters asked where they got it from, but the man thought that if he told them, the boy might be killed. And then Jinsu himself told the hunters that this was his food, and then asked why they thought that if they were stronger, they could attack people. Kwon also said that this was excellent logic and he would use it and beat them up. This angered the hunters and they attacked the guy. But Jinsu quickly gave them some bruises and said that they could tell their boss what happened. And then he immediately added that something worse could happen to them after this. The hunters said they understood everything and wouldn't tell anything, and Kwon told them to get lost. At this time, at the base, Yeon noticed on the map where one of the Lich's living vessels lives, and they need to go this route if they want to liberate the Forbidden Lands. At dawn the next day, the Second Strike Force penetrated the Forest of the Dead. The commander ordered to take on the enemy and break through by any means necessary. But the monsters turned out to be very strong and killed many hunters, even despite their armor. One of the hunters returned to the base and reported to Ulva that the first company was destroyed, and the second was pushed back, and if they continued, the monsters would reach the base. Yeon decided that they needed to rearm, but that it would take time, and she ordered that squads be sent forward to gather resources and provisions. The hunter tried to object, but the leader said that they had no choice, and also said that all hunters should retreat and rearm. Coming to the workers, this messenger told them that they needed to go to the place marked on the map. But the people replied that there was a battle with monsters going on there, and they wouldn't be able to stop them, and that this wasn't even written in the contract. The messenger only hit the man with his sword and told them to carry out the order. And even knowing that this was the road of death, the collection teams could not help but go. In any case, the end awaited them if they stayed. As soon as the people arrived at their destination, the dead began to kill them. Jinsu couldn't let people die just like that, and the man said that they only came because they didn't want to die right away at the hands of the hunters. And Kwon asked what they would do if they returned alive, and the man replied that if he survived, he would like to take his wife on a trip to beautiful places. Then Jinsu said that they should try to survive and took out his dagger. The man was shocked that this guy wanted to fight, and Kwon replied that he wasn't going to die here. The Dullahans weren't considered elite, and he could handle them alone. However, he wouldn't be able to do this if he had to protect the entire squad, so all that was left was to make them hunters. Jinsu called Apple and asked to exchange points to save these people, and the ball replied that it was not necessary. But Kwon told the ball to do what he asked, and then the ball again gave him 4 cards to choose from. The guy chose Invite to Group, and people immediately received this invitation, and the guy realized that their new employee is a hunter. They were offered to become hunters in the raid, and Jinsu told them to quickly agree because the monsters were already advancing. The man immediately shouted to the others to accept the invitation, and they agreed since they had nowhere else to go. 28 people joined the group and received the skill Army Command. Jinsu gave the command for the others to follow him and kill the 4 monsters. They were Dullahans, and the people were a little confused at the sight of them. But Kwon saw that they were stronger than he thought. Kwon immediately shouted at the people to step back, and at that time the monster swung his club, but the people were suddenly enveloped in a dome of honeycombs. Then Kwon jumped towards the monster and pierced its heart with his dagger. The people were glad that they could survive and decided to fight together with Jinsu. But the guy said that he would take the attack on himself, and they were safe as long as they were all here together. Then Quan went to deal with the rest of the monsters, but they seemed even stronger. And Jinsu used the skill Dagger Summoning. His weapon immediately became more powerful, and he quickly dealt with the dead. And at the Solva base, the hunter reported the situation again. He said that the 5th Resource Gathering Squad and the 2nd Provision Squad had been destroyed. And also the monsters moved south again at 11 o'clock towards their base. Yan only got angry when she heard this. Then the leader gave him the order to prepare for battle again. And the hunter added that the Dullahans had completely disappeared from the radar. Yan asked how many teams were heading that way, and the hunter said it was the 7th Resource Gathering Squad. Seolhwa remembered Jinsu and thought it might be because of him, but then she thought about what he could do on his own. Yan asked the hunter what happened to the members of the squad, and he replied that their presence was not confirmed, and most likely they were destroyed along with the Dullahans. The leader thought that if the people were destroyed, then this guy could have died too. But she didn't care much since they gave her time. Then the hunter said that the Dullahans were approaching the camp and asked what they should do. Yan said to send the C-rank hunters below to the front line for 2 hours, and let the A-rank hunters prepare for the attack. Meanwhile, Jinsu, after dealing with the monsters, freed the people from the dome and asked what they would do now. Quan also said that the Heavenly Demon Guild abandoned them, and if they return, it might happen again. The man replied that they had already figured it out themselves, and then Jinsu offered to help him. The group leader asked how they could help, and Quan said that he was going to clean out the Heavenly Demon Guild's item warehouse. Meanwhile, Solva and the hunters entered the battlefield with monsters that surrounded them from all sides. Yan said that by destroying them, they would clear the way to the guardian guarding the Lich's living vessel. The leader also said that this needed to be done as quickly as possible and also entered the battle. And while they were fighting, a man from the work squad told Jinsu that he now understood how this raid was going. And then he asked what the point of robbing a warehouse of items was, since even 10 lives wouldn't be enough to pay them back. Quan replied that they were essentially already dead, since the guild had sent them as a shield to certain death. And the man said that if they came back, they would thus report that they were alive. And Jinsu answered him that they would act slowly and also see how they dealt with the guardian of the living vessel Lich. And the guild squads fought long and hard until only one Dullahan remained. And when they won, Solwa asked the commander for the location of the guard. She replied that, as they had assumed, it was at point J, 505. The commander also said that the guard's special feature is that it starts moving only if someone is within a radius of 100 meters from it. Yan thought that now all that was left was to eliminate the guard and the mission would be completed. And the main forces led by the Heavenly Demon would deal with the Lich. The commander said that if they hurried, they could arrive before the next dawn. And so they set out. By 5 o'clock in the morning, they were already 30 miles from the guard. All the soldiers were dispersed, and there was still 3 meters to get closer. Solwa knew the guardian would react to the intrusion, but she had a bad feeling about it. Then the hunters shouted that the guardian had awakened. Yan decided that they needed to check the guardian's class first. Only then would they be able to carry out a full-scale attack. And suddenly she heard a sound, not as heavy as the Dullahans, rather very mobile. Realizing that it was a danger, she immediately shouted for no one to come closer. But it was too late. A death knight with a fiery skull came out and immediately laid waste to many soldiers. This knight used a super sword and was so strong that no one would be surprised if the monster appeared as a boss of a high-level dungeon. And the guard stood before the army and asked how they dared to set foot on his territory. And then he said that he would make it so that they would neither be able to live nor die. After these words, the guard rushed to attack, and the hunters in turn also ran to fight him. Adjutant Lunpa told the leader that at this rate they would all soon die and asked her to give the order. Yan understood that the enemy was too strong, and even if they sacrificed their entire squad, they still wouldn't be able to leave a single scratch on the monster. At that moment, the adjutant was also wounded, but he told the leader that he would hold out as long as he could, and that they should begin the attack. The strength in his arms was already running out, and he hoped to withstand at least a few more blows. Yang shouted to Commander Pei Pei to gather all her energy and shoot while Lumpa held off the monster. The adjutant could no longer bear it and almost gave in, and then Pei Pei fired a powerful stream. This energy flew towards the knight in sharp ice fragments, and the commander hoped that it would work. There was a loud explosion, and everyone began to look closely to see if they had managed to defeat the monster. But when the smoke cleared, everyone saw that the knight was unharmed. So Solwa sent Pei Pei to the Heavenly Demon to report the situation. The commander began to object that he did not leave Yeon here alone, and she said that this monster was stronger than everyone. and if she could not cope, then someone should finish what was started. Seolwa also told Pei to request S-rank hunters for help, and as soon as the commander left, Yan rushed to attack the monster. The girl used the ice deity palm, and sharp fragments flew at the knight. But nothing happened to him again, and Seolwa began to attack him with her sword. The monster was not affected by any attack, but the leader did not give up and used the palm of ice and snow. However, the knight was still unharmed. Yeon fought him for 10 minutes, after which the knight told her that she was strong, but that was her limit. And Seolwa replied that even if she died, she would take him with her. But at the same time, she understood that all she had left was her natural chi. There was no other choice. Yeon had to kill him even if she spent all her resources and used the ice deity's cold spirit. After this blow, the Death Knight turned into an ice statue, and Seolwa thought she had won. But soon a cracking sound began to be heard in the ice. The ice shattered into pieces, and a monster came out from there. While the girl was in shock, the knight approached her and inflicted a mortal wound to her heart. The monster itself also had 47% damage, and its body had to go into hibernation mode to recover. And just as he was about to do so, someone called him from behind. It was Jinsu, and the knight asked if he had come to fight him too. Kwon replied that the battle was the event before he received wounds, and now the expression, "the last blow at 0 HP," would be more appropriate. The knight shouted that he would tear him to pieces and attacked. But the boy was quicker and deftly avoided the monster's attacks, teasing him. The guard told Jinsu that he would die anyway if only his body were whole. Kwon replied that this was why he had come to deliver the final blow. And the guy also decided to give the monster some advice, that if he had already decided to become a middle boss, then at least surround himself with subordinates. Kwon added that he got a buff, became a little stronger, and decided to get rid of everyone on his own. And now this is what happened. Jinsu told the knight to remember this lesson for the future, and the monster asked if he would spare him, since it was better for him to live as a reptile, but to wait until his body was restored. But the guy clarified that he should remember this lesson in case he suddenly returned to life. The monster got angry and attacked him again. Kwon made a dagger summoning, and the knight only said that he would not even hurt him with his toothpick. Jinsu replied that it was just reaction speed, and immediately summoned a huge number of daggers, which he threw at the monster. The daggers pierced the knight's body, weakening him even more, and Kwon prepared to deliver the finishing blow. The guy stuck his dagger into the monster's skull, but in doing so, he impaled himself on the knight's sword, which the guard pierced his body with. Jinsu fell to the ground and spent one sharp turn of the law of causality, after which events went in reverse order. Kwon found himself again at the moment when he was about to deliver the finishing blow. He jumped at the monster, but this time he managed to jump back before the knight pierced himself, because this law did not apply to the guard himself, and he did not remember what had already happened. The monster didn't understand how it happened, and Jinsu said that he couldn't be caught twice on the same hook. The guardian began to dissipate into ashes, and Kwon received the Death Knight's cuirass and another soul as a reward. The guy activated object recognition, and it told him that the main advantage of the cuirass is high protection, but it can ruin the personality of its owner. In addition, it increases the evasion skill, reduces physical and magical damage, and in combat with the undead, all damage is reduced by 50%. Kwon liked it, even though it sounded like cheating. And only the weight of 15 kilor was a concern, because you had to be a tank to wear this cuirass. The guy only had 12 sharp turns of the law of causality left, but even without armor, with such a unique ability, one can forget about death. During the entire battle with the knight, a man from the squad watched Kwon. At first, he took him for a self-confident kid, but then, in the hunt for the Dullahans, he realized that Kwon was a strong hunter. But now this man saw that the battle had crossed the line of ordinary strength. Even Yang Solhwa, one of the top guild members, was inferior in strength. The man also thought that Jinsu had a rank higher than S. Then he approached him and said that they had found a cave on the other side. The whole squad with Kwon went to the cave and saw many treasures there, and Jinsu understood why such a large squad for resource collection was taken on the raid. Kwon said that everyone should take as much as they could carry, but the man did not believe that the guy was giving it all to them. Jinsu replied that they could take everything except the magic stones, but even that was more than enough for the people. Kwon told the man not to feel obligated, since the boy couldn't carry it on his own anyway. The man then asked if Kwon would go with them, but he replied that he still had things to do and asked them not to go to dangerous places. Jinsu found himself in another cave where there was an energy ball on a pedestal. Quan thought that if this was destroyed, then the Lich's immortality would disappear and immediately struck the ball with a dagger. The sphere split in two. A message appeared in front of Jinsu that the forest of the dead had been cleared and the last vessel of life had been destroyed, and the Lich had lost his immortality. The guy understood that now a real war would begin because just one guard had mowed down the entire attacking detachment. Quan didn't know if they could stand up to Lich, who was the boss. After some time, a war began in the Ash Cradle area, and the undead and guild troops were ready for battle. The guild leader had not seen the Lich, but she knew that he would appear when the main formation began to collapse. The troops began to attack each other. They fought with all their might and mercilessly. And Jinsu stood nearby on a tree branch and saw everything. As he expected, the main members of the guild easily dealt with the Dullahans. The guy decided that he could not worry for now and visit the cave with treasures. Meanwhile, the troops were killing their opponents when suddenly hellfire fell upon the guild. It was the Lich himself. The Lich addressed the people and said that today they would taste death and even more. And the boss told his soldiers that they were worthy of pride and ordered them to rise up and attack the cruel people. The guild leader ordered all squads to disperse at 3 and 6 o'clock and draw the attention of the monsters to themselves. In this way, she planned to capture the Lich. The monsters rushed to attack the people, and after some time, the people still managed to defeat the dead. But the Lich again sent the hellfire of the ninth circle and endlessly summoned monsters. Over time, the hunters began to tire, and the advantage was again on the side of the dead. The boss even resurrected the fallen hunters from the dead, and the more they killed, the stronger they became. The hunters' line was destroyed. Jinsu did not expect such a turn of events and understood that the only way out was to destroy the Lich, thereby preventing the revival of the undead. However, such intervention was too serious for the guy, and if everything was left like that, it would only get worse. One of the hunters told the leader Wei Yang that the 3 and 7 o'clock squads were completely destroyed, and he also said that he was also dead. The captain said that this was not the end, and if the entire guild became bait and sacrificed themselves, it would not matter. Wei also said that they would break through to the center when the monsters' battle formation was most dispersed. And you need to wait until the Death Knights move as far away from the Lich as possible. After 30 minutes, many of the hunters were killed, but they managed to draw the Death Knights aside. Yi Wei gave the order to Heimu's squad to break through. With the captain at the head, the hunters rushed towards the Lich, sweeping away the dead that they came across along the way. The Lich himself, Wei Yang, decided to take charge, and the boss immediately began to use his magical abilities. The Lich created a mana shield around himself, but the girl said that it would not last long. The monster told her not to get too cocky because he would turn her into dust. To this, Wei said that she had never lost a one-on-one fight. After many blows from the captain, the shield began to lose its power, and the Lich used chain lightning. Wei was already having a hard time holding on, and the counterattack only added to her problems. And there were 4 Death Knights approaching. Yang didn't expect this and ordered to stop these monsters. At the same time, she realized that Lich was only trying to buy time until the knights arrived. But no matter how hard the hunters tried, one of the monsters with a burning skull managed to break through and headed towards Wei Yang. The leader thought that it would be better to deal with the guard first, but then the Lich would be able to restore his army during this time. Jinsu appeared on the battlefield, rushing towards the Death Knight to deal with him. The guard immediately rushed to attack the guy, but Quan was sure that these knights were definitely weaker than the one who was pumped up by the Vessel of Life. And Wei, seeing Jinsu, realized that he was not from their squad because her hunters were given the equipment of the Heavenly Demon Guild. The girls saw how easily the guy fought the knight, and yet he was not counted among their ranks. And Quan just shouted at her not to wait and to destroy the Lich while he was holding back the guards. Wei didn't know who he was, but she was indebted to him and rushed to attack the boss. However, his magic power still held. The captain decided to gather all her strength into one blow to end the fight, using the spiritual sword ability. But the Lich began to fire hellfire at his opponent again. However, she struck his shield and it began to crack. The girl was not afraid of his attack. Even if her body turned to dust, she decided to make a final push. After that, the Lich was finished, but Wei was badly wounded in the shoulder and the hunters became worried. The girl told them that there was no reason to make a fuss. Besides, she was glad that they were able to take back Nanjing. And then the leader ordered to collect the fairy's tears, but to be careful. Wei considered it a worthy payment for such torment. Half an hour later, at the base camp, the hunter reported to Wei that they had searched everything inside, but the fairy's tears were still not found. The captain's wife couldn't believe it because they definitely had to be there. The hunter replied that they even used the target scroll, but nothing was found within a radius of 2 kilometers. For a moment, Wei thought that the fairy's tears might have been taken away by the stranger who was holding back the knights. But the captain thought it was too much for his help. She immediately gave the order to find the guy in the hoodie. Meanwhile, Quan understood that the task was not yet completed, despite the fact that the lich was dead. And the dungeon hadn't collapsed yet, so there was something else left. Jinsu even thought that there was another monster stronger than the lich. The boss's death was not in his plans because there was still so much to gain. And then the guy noticed two people in the cave, a guy and a girl. The guy started forming a gate. Jinsu watched and didn't understand how he managed to open a new gate in a dungeon that hadn't yet been destroyed. The girl, meanwhile, said that although Lich's death was unexpected, she was confident that they would achieve their goal. But the guy with the blindfold on said to quickly take the souls while they were still fresh. Quan heard them talking about souls and realized that someone else was using them to become stronger. At this point, Jinsu realized that these two were collecting people's souls, and he couldn't let them do that. Quan immediately used research, but it showed that the skill level was insufficient, and he only learned that they were necromancers. Jinsu had never heard of such a status among hunters before and thought it would be worth asking them about it personally. The people immediately noticed Quan approaching them, and the guy with the bandage asked how the rat got in there. He told Quan that he didn't look like a hunter from the Heavenly Demon Guild, and Jinsu replied that the same could be said about them. And then he asked what two necromancers were doing here, and the girl asked in response how he knew that. Quan said that if they were so interested, then let them find out for themselves. And the guy with the bandage immediately pounced to destroy the guest. However, Jinsu deftly parried his blow, and the girl joined the fight, directing huge tentacles towards Quan. The guy with the bandage used slow down, and it became more difficult for Jinsu to move. But any delay could put Quan at a disadvantage, so he used acceleration. This helped, and Jinsu dealt with the tentacles very quickly and then was going to deal with their owner. The girl immediately put up a protective barrier, but from the enemy's blow it began to crack and burst. And while the stranger lay exhausted, Quan rushed towards the blindfolded guy, destroying his shield as well. Having laid the necromancers out, Jinsu repeated his question about who they were, and the guy with the bandage answered that he knew about Quan's power and that they had no chance from the very beginning. Jinsu asked how they knew what kind of power he used. The girl replied that they recognized the trademark. The guy with the bandage only added that since Quan was here, they had to kill him, and he replied that he had already shown the difference in abilities. The guy with the bandage said that it doesn't mean they don't have a way, and then said that everything is by the will of the Great One. An incomprehensible aura began to form around the two, and then an explosion was heard. The flames from the explosion reached Jinsu as well, and he used up another sharp turn of the law of causality. Finding himself at the moment of the explosion again, Quan used acceleration and hurried to escape from the fire. But the flames still caught up with him, and Jinsu made another sharp turn. To avoid the explosions in the tight space, Quan had to find a blind spot, and while he was doing that, several more turns were wasted. But the guy still couldn't find the blind spot, and there was only one way left. Quan jumped towards the glowing sphere that the necromancers had created and stabbed his dagger into it. There was a flash, and energy that was incomprehensible to Quan began to emanate from the sphere. The guy was immediately enveloped in this energy, and then a message opened that he had received 100 souls and all his characteristics were now enhanced. And once again, finding himself at the moment of explosion from the necromancers, Jinsu was able to withstand the flames, only his hoodie burned. Quan realized that he only survived because he absorbed people's souls, and then he called Apple. The ball laughed a little at the guy's appearance, and he ordered to quickly open the portal home. The ball did this, saying that the work was excellent anyway. After returning home, Jinsu immediately went to the hospital ward at the Hunter's branch. There was already a healer there, and Quan asked him to heal Sua because he got what he promised, and he asked if it was a fake. Jinsu confirmed, and the healer decided to proceed with the treatment, dropping one tear on the girl's forehead. The tear began to soak into the skin, and the healer asked Quan to move away and began to move his hands over Sua, causing a haze to appear over the bed. The next moment, the girl opened her eyes, and Jinsu immediately rushed towards her. The guy asked his sister how she was feeling, and she said her head hurt a little. Then she started asking about werewolves and what happened to her friends. At this time, the healer said that his mission was completed, and he was glad that the treatment was successful. He also said that although Sua had regained consciousness, It was better for her to rest until she had fully recovered. Kwon thanked the healer for the treatment, and he, in response to the fairy's tears, asked to keep everything that happened a secret. Hiller left, and Sua continued to ask her brother what happened. Jinsu replied that it would take a long time to explain, but he would definitely tell her everything later. And then the guy's phone rang, and he left the room to answer it. Bailson calling and saying that he had found the buyer that Jinsu had asked about, but that the buyer wanted to do the deal in person. Kwon replied that he did not want to reveal his identity, but the seller said that without this condition, the buyer would not go through with the deal. Jinsu asked if there was another buyer, and Bailson said that the Heavenly Demon Guild was currently scouring black markets around the world. The seller also said that he was doing everything he could, but finding a new buyer could be risky, since no one would dare stick their nose out while the guild was keeping an eye on him. The guy didn't like the fact that he had such a treasure on his hands and couldn't sell it, and he felt like a thief who stole a work of art. But there was nothing to be done, because only this sale would allow him to raise the necessary amount. Kwon agreed and asked the salesman to help him meet the buyer. Bailson replied that he would handle it in no time. Jinsu returned to the ward, where the nurse immediately asked if he had finished with the discharge paperwork, and he replied that they could go now. Sua said she was hungry and asked her brother to buy her something tasty. Kwon replied that he would feed her until she was full, and Sua asked where he got that kind of money, since he knew nothing but games. The guy didn't answer, but only suggested that they leave quickly. And soon they were sitting at a table in a restaurant, and Kwon was asking his sister to eat more. Jinsu bought his sister a lobster, but she said it was too expensive. Her brother told her not to worry about money and just eat. Sua agreed with him. Kwon saw how much she enjoyed the food and was glad to see her so happy. And then the guy finally admitted to his sister that now he was a hunter and he didn't have to worry about money. However, Sua did not like this news because she told him never to do this. Jinsu said that the situation was hopeless, but the girl did not need excuses and demanded an explanation. Kwon said that he didn't intend to become a hunter, but it was the only way he could save her. Sua realized that it was because of her, but Jinsu replied that anyone would do the same in such a situation. And the sister asked her brother not to take on too dangerous tasks. At this time, the healer James Wedgwood met with the blonde Kenneth, and he asked if the matter had been resolved. Hiller replied that everything was fine, but he was tired because he hadn't used force for a long time. Kenneth asked if the old man wanted to tell Kwon everything. He replied that the main thing here was consistency, and Jinsu was not ready to accept everything yet. The young man said that they didn't have any extra time for that because those bastards were collecting souls in the Forbidden Territory, and James reminded that Kwon got rid of them. Then Kenneth said that there was no guarantee that the same would happen next time, and the old man was even amused that he was so excited, which had not happened for a long time. The blonde said that they had found it with great difficulty, and in that case, they should get it all the more. And the healer asked him to stop for now because Kwon had just returned his sister, and they needed to be given at least a little time. The old man also said that there was no point in rushing, and anyway, Jinsu would want to meet them first. After some time, Kwon returned to the village of Bale and asked if everything was ready. The village chief replied that they had already managed to get used to it even with the new equipment. All this time, Kwon couldn't sleep peacefully, thinking about how much money had been poured into the village, but now he would definitely take possession of the mithril mine as a reward. Also, intelligence reported to the guy that there are only two types of monsters, kobolds and lizardmen. Kwon told the skeletons that it was not necessary to deal with everyone. The most important thing was to pave the way to the mine. After that, Jinsu decided to take a walk to the tower and saw that the buildings had already been completed, and he gained access to the black shop. Returning home, the guy decided to check what was in this shop and saw that he could get papyrus for 2,000 magic stones. This papyrus gives you the opportunity to save unique abilities of the hidden level obtained by exchanging points. Kwon thought the price was expensive, but he agreed it was worth it and clicked the pay button. The papyrus unfolded into gold-colored paper, but nothing was written on it yet. Jinsu counted the points and realized that he could exchange them for 3 hidden abilities and then save them. The guy also decided to see what skill he received as a reward for the quest in the village. And he received throwing, reflection, acceleration, study, and binding. With Bin skill at level 1, Kwon could now bind a C-rank monster. Jinsu decided to look for enhancement stones. One stone cost 200 million, but there were none available. And the guy had no choice but to go hunting for monsters. Kwon typed power stones into the search bar and was immediately given information that a gate had opened at Seomyeon Station in Busan, which was in a state of suspended animation. Kwon read that according to the official position of the Hunter's branch, whoever enters the dungeon first will take possession of it. But this gate didn't appear randomly, and Jinsu felt like it looked like a portal created by Apple. The guy immediately called the ball and showed it this gate. The ball confirmed that it was a portal created by someone. The ball also said that there are many types of portals that can become gates. And Kwon asked if he could enter there, but the ball did not know the answer and suggested that he check it himself. Soon Jinsu was already in Busan. In the 12 hours since the gate appeared, thousands of hunters visited this place. And after 1,000 attempts, it was decided that it was impossible to enter. Late in the evening, Kwon approached them, put his hand on them, and felt them resonate. And then a message appeared that the gates were happy to welcome an irregular, and the guy immediately found himself inside. Jinsu had felt a similar feeling when he first entered the Tower of Origins. But this was different. As soon as the boy took his first steps, there was a flash and he was enveloped in an unknown energy. When the haze cleared, Kwon saw that he was standing in the middle of a field with many swords and spears stuck into it. The guy guessed that the weapon had not been abandoned at all, and that the place itself looked more like a hunter's cemetery. Kwon heard a voice behind him, indicating that he was being watched, although the boy didn't notice anything when he entered. Above him, Jinsu saw something that looked like an apple, only it glowed red. And this something said that Kwon was his first guest in a long time. The red ball said that this place was a hunter's cemetery and each weapon had a loving owner. Jinsu asked the ball if it was he who killed them, and the ball replied that they themselves chose this path and now it was Kwon's turn to choose. A board appeared in front of the guy which said that the connection to the 6 gates was beginning and a new raid was being launched. And also, a new gate was formed in the C rank gate, and the rating of the formed gate was A rank. Jinsu couldn't understand what was going on. The guy saw a video on the board where hunters were fighting a huge number of goblins, and it looked like the monsters were winning. Kwon said that according to the orb, this test was for him, and then asked why these people are connected to this place. The orb answered that such are the rules. Jinsu remembered the gate that had recently opened in the cave where he had fought Yuna and the other hunters, and asked if it was related to that. The guy also said that the ball should tell about these rules. And it answered that now about 300 hunters are connected with this place, and some of them are already dead. Char also said that Kwon needs to kill the boss before the remaining hunters die, and then he will win. And Jinsu asked what will happen if he refuses or cannot win. Red Apple replied that then another weapon would lose its owner, and it would be difficult for the hunters connected to the gate to get out alive. He was given 1 hour to complete the task, and a passage with a ladder appeared in front of Kwon. Before leaving, Jinsu asked Apple why he was doing this. Apple replied that he wanted to test whether Kwon was worthy of possessing the power of an irregular. The guy also asked why the ball chose him, and he said that it was not his responsibility to answer such a question. At the same time, 15 hunters started talking in front of the red door. They thought that there were monsters behind it, and this needed to be checked. Hunter Yoon Seungul said that they can't stand by and wait for the situation to get better. He also said that at first it was a C rank gate, but ever since the new gate appeared in the dungeon, everything has changed dramatically. They barely escaped the vampires, and if they had to face a crowd of vampires and sorcerers again, then they would all be considered corpses. And then Yun added that if they caught the boss, the dungeon would close, and they would be able to defeat him by uniting, no matter how strong he was. The man with the gray beard said that it made no difference whether they died here or at the boss's hands. And others suggested that this might not be the boss's room. Hunter Hansoy suggested that since everyone was thinking about getting out of here as quickly as possible, there was no need to wait any longer and go in. But as soon as the girl wanted to pull the door handle, someone shouted at them to stop. It was Jinsu running towards them, and all the hunters immediately recognized him and were glad to see him. And Kwon immediately told the hunters that he would deal with the boss himself, and that they should wait here, since serious danger awaited them inside. Han So-yi asked if it wouldn't be better if they helped him somehow, and Yoon added that if they retreated now, they would immediately be labeled as cowards. Jinsu replied that he had to survive first and then worry about being accused of cowardice. Besides, he couldn't protect them without knowing anything about the boss. At this time, many vampires appeared in the hall again, and the hunters decided to hide behind the red door anyway. Once inside, people were glad that the vampires had not managed to surround them. Otherwise, they would have been in trouble. And only Kwon Jinsu saw that the situation was worse than ever, and he didn't know why the others didn't feel this deadly energy. There was something definitely unusual right in front of him. Suddenly, a patch of black energy appeared and asked the people how they dared to invade his domain. Kwon immediately shouted for everyone to run away, but the sharp spikes had already managed to pierce many hunters to death, and some simply had parts of their bodies torn off. Only a few people remained. Han So-yi was shaking from what had happened. Ah-yoon began to ask how they could fight such a monster. Another hunter suggested that they would have a much better chance of survival if they had stopped the wave of monsters outside. Jinsu didn't know what would happen to the survivors, so he decided to rush forward and attract the monster's attention so that the others could escape. Kwon did so, and the boss, saying that he himself was running into the arms of death, immediately pointed his spikes at him. Kwon was now reduced to little more than pieces, and he once again applied one sharp twist of the law of causality. The guy was about 50 meters away from the monster again, but now he knew where the spikes were, and if he jumped back, he could dodge them. But it wasn't easy to get to the monster either, and another problem was that there wasn't much time left, and the guy decided to use the time delay and get close to the boss. However, this time, Jinsu was able to dodge the spikes, and the boss found this curious. The monster immediately launched another batch of spikes, and they pierced Kwon's body again. Just like last time, Jinsu used a sharp turn to turn back, and then it happened 3 more times. However, there were still 10 meters left to the monster. Kwon hoped that in the next couple of times he would be able to get to the boss. The monster couldn't believe how this hunter managed to get around the spikes, because he attacked with all his might to prevent anyone from getting closer. Then the boss asked the guy directly how he managed to dodge and close the distance. At the same time, the monster launched another sharp weapon that repeated Kwon's movements. And as soon as the guy tried to do something, this weapon pierced his body again. Jinsu took another turn and immediately decided to change the direction of the things pursuing him. Kwon also intended to break through at maximum speed before the spikes rose. The monster was shocked to see his opponent moving as if he knew in advance where the spikes would appear. Then the boss used condensation, and Kwon once again fell into the monster's trap. But after another twist, Jinsu told the boss that it was now his turn to experience the torment of death. The guy stuck one of the spikes into the monster and dared him to see if he could withstand it. Then he finished him off with his dagger. As he was dying, the boss only said that it couldn't be that he would die here at the hands of a human. Jinsu only told him to shut up in response and stepped on his head with all his might. The first trial was passed, and Kwon received 1 soul, 1 unidentified item, 1 key of darkness, and a memory shard. The guy was a little disappointed that this was only the first test, because he thought that this was the end, but as it turned out, there would be others. Kwon was tormented by the question of how many more would be sacrificed in the name of this so-called test. Approaching the hunters, Kwon asked how the victims were, and Hansoy replied that thanks to the assistance provided, their lives were not in danger. The girl also asked if they would see each other again, and Jinsu replied that they would see each other if fate decreed so. And then he added that he hoped that next time it wouldn't happen in a dungeon like this. Seong-il intervened in their conversation, saying that the dungeon was closing. Kwon determined that he had half an hour at most and told the hunters to move forward. Han asked what Jinsu would do, and he replied that he still had some things to sort out and would catch up with them once he finished. Yoon agreed, and taking the wounded men by the arms, they headed towards the exit, and Jinsu prepared for the next task. Kwon took the ring he had received out of his pocket, thinking that the most expensive of all items were accessories. But considering the boss's level, the guy expected at least rank A from the accessory. Jinsu used recognition and found out that it was Angola Muma's ring, and its active ability was to reflect dark magic of rank A and below, with a cooldown of 24 hours. The ring also had a magic power recovery rate of plus 10% and magic resistance of plus 10%. Kwon liked that the ring had 3 additional effects. Jinsu immediately put on the ring and immediately felt a powerful surge of magical power. Kwon decided that he would go to the association later and check how much his magical power had increased. The next item that Jinsu learned was the trial key. It allowed the second trial to begin, but it also had to be used within a month. Kwon was a little nervous before the second test. After all, he managed to defeat Angola Muma by using up a lot of turns of the law of causality. And Jinsu understood that in the future, the same trials awaited him, if not more difficult. And innocent hunters would die without even knowing the reason. The guy had a month left for everything. He shouted to the red ball that he didn't know what it was trying to achieve, but he would deal with everything. Returning home, Kwon examined the fragment of memories, and he decided to check what this fragment gives. Without any hesitation, Jinsu clenched the pebble in his fist, and immediately a bright flash was heard. The guy saw himself in an unfamiliar city where there were a lot of people on the street. He decided to approach one girl and ask her where he was. But she seemed not to hear him. She continued on her way and literally passed through Jinsu like a ghost. Kwon realized that this was just a holographic virtual reality, like the Lost City. Suddenly, the boy heard someone telling him to take a closer look at what was happening. Jinsu turned around and saw his apple, but he didn't call her and asked how he appeared here. The ball just told him to watch because now everything was about to start. And suddenly explosions began to be heard around, and buildings began to collapse. People immediately panicked, not understanding what was happening, and ran in all directions. At that moment, the very center of the collapsing city plunged into chaos and drowned in bloody color. And then several portals appeared in the middle of the street, from which various monsters immediately began to appear. The remaining people asked each other what was going on, and whoever could, tried to fight the uninvited guests. However, no matter how hard people tried, the monsters were much stronger than them and won. And then some huge blue stone giant appeared, and people started to panic. With the level of this monster, even 10 hunters couldn't cope with it to defeat it. Jinsu thought that in order to resist such a monster, he would need 20 times his current strength. Kwon asked Apple if these were memories of Judgment Day. The ball replied that these were not memories of that day. Jinsu suggested that this was not the past, and the ball only asked to look more carefully because these were scenes of the near future. In addition, countless major cities around the world have been attacked. All the rankers who had been shining in the news and on the internet had died, and the bodies of the hunters were piling up in mountains. Kwon suggested that a second Judgment Day was coming, and in the future the world would be destroyed and there was no way to prevent it. But Jinsu still hoped that there must be a way. After all, that was why he was sent this message. Then the guy received a text message from Bailson that he had found a buyer and wanted to set up the deal today. But he insisted that Kwon personally come to his house. The seller also sent the address, Gyeonggi-do, Paju City, District XX, 55th Street, Building 99, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. At the appointed time, Kwon arrived at the specified address and rang the doorbell without delay. Kwon thought it was strange, but he didn't feel the presence of a person. However, they themselves set the time, so someone must be inside. Jinsu opened the door, walked in, and immediately realized that something was wrong. There was definitely a smell of blood inside the house. The guy wondered what he had gotten himself into and went on to look around. Suddenly, a sword flew in front of him, but Kwon deftly dodged it. And the guy who swung it said that Jinsu was smart. Kwon replied that he simply couldn't help but notice when the smell of blood literally hits his nose. And then he asked the man present if he was the one who killed everyone here. Chegal Chonis at home replied that yes, because they were after their trophy, so it was an obvious outcome. And then he added that the same thing awaited Jinsu. Kwon realized that this was a person from the Heavenly Demon Guild. He didn't even think that their intelligence was so good. The guild hunter told Kwon to give back what was theirs. He replied that he could have promised to spare his life first, since that was how deals were usually made. Chegal responded by saying that he was only giving Jinsu a chance to meet a peaceful death. Otherwise, he would cut off his limbs and make him die in agony. Kwon threw up his hands and told him to try if he was so confident in himself. The guild hunter immediately pounced on Jinsu, but he dodged it as usual. At that moment, 2 more people appeared in the room, a bearded man and a girl. And the girl said that the name of the unknown had caused a lot of noise in the Lost City, and it seemed that the rumors were not lying. And Kwon said that killing a civilian is already a serious crime, and if he also kills him, it will cause big diplomatic problems. Hunter with a beard, Hwangbo Gunok, said that this would only happen if they were caught. Manhwa, the girl who showed up with him, added that they would kill Kwon and no one would know about it. But Jinsu answered them that he would not meekly wait to be killed and immediately prepared his weapon. The guy also used study and found out that the first hunter he met here was Chegal-jong, the second Hwangbo Gunok, and the huntress Ha Yeonhwa. Kwon called their names out loud and they were surprised how he knew about them. And Chegal told his comrades not to get lost. The guy simply felt them out with a special skill. Chan also said that there are a lot of different individual abilities and skills, and he wouldn't be surprised if the skill of reading information was among them. Jinsu realized that this Chegal would be the hardest for him, but he suddenly said not to kill Kwon, because then they would not know where the fairy's tears were. The guy was even glad that they needed him alive, because that way they wouldn't inflict fatal attacks on him. And Quan thought that he wouldn't have to put in much effort, even though they had joined forces and were pushing him towards the corner. Chagall, attacking the guy, only said that this place would become Jinsu's grave. However, Quan saw that they would not let him go or retreat so easily, and decided to use all his strength to deal with them in an instant. Chagall noticed something and told the guy that it was useless to run because they knew where he lived. Yonghua also said that the girl at Jinsu's house was pretty cute. Jinsu was very angry that this girl decided to touch his sister and began to ask what they did to her. Yoa asked in response why he was so wound up, since everyone he was connected to was destined to say goodbye to life anyway. These words made Quan even more angry. He was burning with rage and continued to ask what they did to Sua. Huangbo and Yonghua were even a little scared, and Chagall realized that this was killing lust, because only she could awaken such magical power, turning Quan into a different person. Jinsu was truly ready to kill these three hunters, and his strength became so strong that he easily deflected Gunok's massive sword with his dagger. But Quan didn't just fight back, he also attacked. And he hit Huangbo with such force that he crashed into the wall. Gunok and Yonghua couldn't believe that Jinsu was able to land such a powerful blow. The girl muttered that the materials of the Korean branch of hunters wrote complete nonsense about this AA ranker, and Chagall thought that in such a small country there was a similar monster hiding, which perhaps was not even inferior in strength to Lord Heavenly Demon. Chan also understood that in this case, in a one-on-one battle, neither of them had a chance, and there was only one way left. Chagall shouted for everyone to attack at the same time. In the frontal attack, Quan saw the will of the sword, which he did not yet know on the sides. Jinsu decided to test how they attack first, even if it meant taking losses. Chagall attacked Quan with a sword and Yonghua with sickles, and after this triple attack, which ended in an explosion, Jinsu had to apply one sharp turn of the law of causality. When the smoke cleared, the guild hunters saw that the body was gone, and Yonghua said that something had gone wrong. And Quan just laughed from the sidelines, saying that he had placed too much hope in their joint attack. Quan also told them that if he had simply dodged initially, he would still have been unharmed since they attacked with such meager abilities. In the end, the guy said that he expected something cooler from the Heavenly Demon Guild. But in any case, now it was their turn to fight back. Quan threw his dagger at Yonghua, who barely managed to block it with her sickle, and asked if that was all he could do after such loud words. And Jinsu replied that she was shaking only after defending herself from a dagger once, but he could show her if he was so impatient. Quan summoned a multitude of daggers and launched them towards the girl, saying that he would see how she would hold up against such a trivial attack. Yonghua was frightened, but she began to swing her sickles with all her might to deflect the many daggers. And Jinsu just continued to mock, saying that he didn't think she would last, but there were still many daggers left, and told her to try to fight off the rest. But no matter how hard Yonghua tried, she couldn't cope with so many weapons, and the daggers pierced her entire body. Chagall and Huangbo couldn't believe that Quan had dealt with their partner so easily. Chan simply went wild and started shouting that he would kill Jinsu, and attacked him, swinging his sword. But Quan blocked his blow with his dagger, and with great ease. Jinsu shouted back at Chagall that he would show him the difference in their levels and hit him with all his might. After landing, Zhang realized that Quan was really strong, and Jinsu just asked again what they did to Sua. Chagall said that they did not touch the girl in his apartment, but simply found out about his surroundings. Quan told him that if he had said this earlier, there would not have been any need to shed blood. Jinsu also told Zhang to go back and tell his people that he hadn't found out anything about him, and also to promise that this wouldn't happen again, and then Quan would spare him. But Chagall refused to fulfill these demands, and Gunok mentally supported him, because the failure of the mission is the same as death, and upon returning they will die from torture. Chagall prepared to attack Quan again, confident that he had enough strength to do so. And then Gunok decided to ask Jinsu if he was the strongest hunter in Korea. Quan didn't understand why he was asking, but he himself didn't know whether he could be called the strongest in their country. But Jinsu still replied that he could call himself the strongest hunter in Korea. And Chagall replied that they could breathe a sigh of relief, because perhaps then their death would not be meaningless. Then the two of them attacked. Gunok used the legendary Great Heaven Sword technique, 5th formation, and Chagall used the Thunder Sword technique, 7th formation. Quan only replied that he accepted their decision and prepared the magical power of the dagger. And their fight ended with a large explosion of energy that went beyond the building. The next day, the Hunters branch reported to Director Kim that they had contacted Director Lee Chow from Beijing. Kim turned on the video link with Lee and they politely greeted each other because they had not seen each other for about a year. When they met a year ago, a gate opened a kilometer away from Dokdo Island, but the power coming from it was weak, despite its A rank. Most of these cases then had little risk and a generous reward, and naturally, Korea claimed ownership of these gates. But Japan protested, standing firm, and eventually, China stepped in to resolve the conflict. The Japanese side promised China half of the reward, and China agreed to the proposal. But Korea objected because there was no justice in this decision. And in the end, she had to retreat without receiving any benefit. Because in the world, only the strongest own everything. Kim told Director Chow that he was not trying to stir up the past, but last night their cameras had caught an interesting scene and showed him a picture of an explosion. Kim asked Lee if he had been told anything about this by any chance. Chow replied that he found it difficult to answer because the picture was of poor quality and too dark. Director Kim thought that this was to be expected, since he would never admit it so easily. The head of the Hunters branch suggested that Chow take a closer look. After all, it was clear that it was the blue will of the sword, and that this is nothing other than the symbol of the Heavenly Demon Guild, the strongest guild in China. The rankers of this guild have arrived in the country, and Kim can't just leave it like that. Chow replied that it sounded like a threat, and Kim replied that it was. Kim also asked whether the Chinese thought the Koreans would not dare to respond. And he asked Lee how he thought this would end if the news reached the American or European Hunters Association. Director Chow didn't know what to say. After all, killing or attacking a hunter from another country without reason is a serious crime. And if America and Europe intervene in the matter, no pretexts will work. Yicho asked what the Hunter branch wanted in this case. Kim replied that he would give him a choice. The first thing Kim said was that Chinese rankers should help reclaim the restricted area. Lee replied that this was out of the question, since the Korean restricted area was more dangerous than Nanjing. Even in Nanjing, they had to lose many S-rank hunters, and Lee can't sacrifice his people for another country's forbidden zone. The second condition Director Kim stated was that China return the treasure dungeon to them. The branch manager added that one of the two had to be chosen, and the decision was up to Director Lee. Kim thought to himself that Chow would agree. After all, unlike the first proposal, which would have put the rankers at risk, returning the dungeon would not carry any risks. And Chow replied that after convening an internal meeting, they would return the dungeon to Korea. Kim thanked Lee for his wise decision and said he hoped such a misfortune would not happen again. Lee said he would check it out, but before the branch manager hung up, he asked if the man on the screen was really a Korean hunter. Kim asked in return if Chow had ever heard the name Unknown, and when Lee replied that he had, the branch manager said that it was him. At the same time, at the hospital at the Hunters branch, Sua asked her brother why they came to the hospital again, since she was completely fine. Jinsu replied that it wouldn't be a bad idea to get checked out, so it would be better for her to stay here for a while. Besides, it would be hard for her to go back and forth without him. And then Kwon added that this was just in case something happened and asked his sister to stay here for a while, and if she needed to go out, to contact Im Daeon. Sua agreed, and her brother told her to call if anything happened, and he himself would drop by to see her in the evening. As he left, Jinsu thought that the longer he worked as a hunter, the more enemies he made. And why didn't he think that they might target Sua? Just in case, Kwon made a teleportation scroll with fixed coordinates for his sister. He simply couldn't allow anything to happen to her anymore. After the hospital, Jinsu went to the village of Bale. There he saw that the skeletons had become larger. Apparently they had raised their level during his absence. The guy checked the table and saw that the skeleton's level had already reached level A. But he didn't find it surprising, since the skeletons had to fight many monsters to get the ore. But even so, the pace for their development seemed too fast, although monsters like the undead simply do not know what fatigue is. Kwon looked at the skeleton commander, and he already had S, rank, and 5 skills in his arsenal, and he would continue to develop if there were enemies. Jinsu thought that if he continued to grow like this, he would not be able to defeat him as an enemy at all. But the boy tried not to worry about it, because after all, it was he who had called him. And the fact that he had forced them to work in the village now seemed like God's will. With such combat power, Kwon Woo would not even be able to handle the monsters, as Jinsu would be able to summon them during a difficult battle, and they would have a strong influence on the outcome. And in the city, Hunter Park Sang-hyuk told the chairman that he would have to pay more for the work because this guy turned out to be stronger than he thought. The chairman replied that with the promised $20 million, he could buy one medium-sized guild. And Pak only asked why he was being greedy, since the head of the most powerful corporation, Chiel, the group has that kind of money. The chairman was very angry about this, and the hunter asked him to cool down, since they were in the same boat. The leader asked why he, knowing this, was still extracting money from him. And Sanhyuk replied that he knew that this guy was one of the rankers. Chang replied that Jinsu, although a ranker, still acts alone. And no matter how strong he is, ultimately he is alone. And then he asked if several capable hunters couldn't catch him. Sangyuk replied that nothing was impossible. However, in battles between hunters, it's not just the amount of mana that matters. That's why he asked the chairman for backup. After all, only by throwing a bigger bait will he be able to lure talented hunters to catch Quan. The head thought about it, since even he couldn't get such a huge sum in such a short time. And Pak told him that he heard that they had tens of times more money in the lubricant fund alone. And to motivate himself, he told the chairman that he was not at all eager to avenge his dear son. And the head of Chill. The group said it would add to the $20 million a buyout fee for 20 stores in the Dongdaemun market for 5 years. Sanhyuk was delighted and accepted the deal. And the chief added that he should bring the guy back in one piece, and he himself would make him beg for death. The Cheongnam Emergency Management Center noticed that an anomaly had appeared. They noticed movement in the restricted area. The spiders were slowly approaching the central area at a speed of 10 km per hour. The captain told the workers to clearly mark the target and pass it on to the local military unit so that they could get a barrier line. Then one employee called the captain to the monitor, and he saw that the matter was critical. The captain ordered to contact the Hunters branch and give the order to evacuate the local residents. Daeun was asking at a meeting about the situation, and the employee replied that it was about giant spiders, since they were urgently called at such a time. Daeun told me to show her the footage from the scene. It showed only one spider, and the employee said that it was not worth making a fuss about. The girl replied that these spiders periodically crawl out of the restricted area, and they would not be called because of this, and that they needed to be observed further. And when the spider approached the camera, everyone saw that it was a new species of spider. All the staff, even Daeun, were scared, not knowing what kind of monsters this was. She immediately ordered them to connect all screens from the scene and immediately check her mana. The employee said that everything was already in process, you just need to wait 3 minutes. Daeun told the planning team to contact the hunters on site. Hunter Kim Jin-young responded. Daeun introduced herself and said that a new species of monster was currently approaching their post at a distance of 500 meters and that they would see it soon. Jin-young asked how they should react, and the girl said to retreat, and a new strike force would be formed to resist in the rear. Kim asked if they could arrange it immediately, and Daeun replied that it would probably take more than an hour. The girl added that there was not much time left, and that they should immediately retreat with the detachment to the rear. But Jin-young refused and replied that they would do everything to stop the monster here. Kim said that their guild is a representative of Cheongnam and has participated in the operation to eliminate giant spiders in the past. They will try to buy as much time as possible until the civilians are evacuated. Daeun told him that if they realized that they couldn't cope, they should retreat immediately. And for their part, they would send an offensive detachment as soon as possible. Jin-young ordered his men to get ready, and they began to prepare their weapons. One of the hunters said that no matter how strong the monster was, it would not be able to withstand this. Soon, a new kind of monster appeared emerging from the fog, and Kim ordered to fire with all his might. The hunters fired their weapons and used their magic abilities. For a moment, a flash was heard where the monster was. However, no one dared to come closer and check, and everyone waited for the smoke to clear. Soon, everyone saw that the spider girl simply threw all the bullets aside. This startled the hunters, and Jin-young ordered them to prepare for a new wave of shelling. But the monster had already begun to attack, tearing the hunters apart and throwing them to the sides. Even experienced hunters did not have time to act and lost their lives at the hands of the monster. Daeun asked if the mana was calculated. The staff member replied that the mana was 58,500, which was at least SS rank. The girl was surprised because even the mana of the strongest hunter in Korea, Choi Muhan, is 43,000 units. And here it's not even a boss, but just a named monster, and its mana exceeds 58,000. Daeun thought that if the strongest hunters attacked at the same time, they would have a chance. But then I also realized that there could be another such monster, and then Korea would come to an end. Here, one employee said that spiders in the restricted area began to show activity. And if this continues, they could lose the Cheongcheongnam-do region in the next 24 hours. Daeun ordered to request assistance from branches of other countries and send out an order to all guilds to participate. She herself called Jinsu, and he realized that she was calling about the restricted area. The girl told him that he had to be in Daejeon by tomorrow morning. Kwon replied that he had received a brief report from the Hwarang Guild and would try to arrive on time. Daeyoung also told the guy that she would send him one video file and asked him to share his opinion. Jinsu asked if this was a new kind of spider, and the girl replied that the opponent's mana alone would make even him wary. She asked to take a look and think about how best to confront such a monster. Kwon thought about the monster, and then an orb appeared, asking if he had decided to take part in the raid. Jinsu replied that he needed to be in Daejeon by morning. Char commented that as soon as one restricted area was closed, a worse place appeared. And then Apple asked if Kwon's presence was necessary, since Korea was already full of hunters. The guy asked in response, what would be the point if he was left alone on the ruins of his country? And then he asked why the ball was asking such a thing. Char replied that Jinsu was an important part of his plan and couldn't just disappear, and it would be a shame for all the effort wasted if Apple suddenly lost him there. Kwon told the ball not to worry because now he could use the secret weapon. Meanwhile, the branch continued to monitor, and an employee said that overseas branches had sent a response that it would be difficult for them to join the raid. Daeun became sad. After all, she believed that at least one country would help them and not coquettishly turn away. The situation was as bad as it could be, and the girl was worried whether they would have enough strength to resist the monsters. The employee reported that no new movements of the spiders were recorded, but instead they continued to gather in yesterday's location. Daeyoung asked about the participation of Korean guilds in the raid, and the employee replied that each guild sent its best hunters. The girl said to form an offensive force, relying on high-ranking guilds and distribute them along the perimeter to strike the first blow. Meanwhile, in Cheongcheongnam-do, the hunters gathered and Park Sang-hyuk said that most of them could die today. And yet so many came running. His comrade replied that famous hunters had gathered here and there was still hope. But he continued to assure that in any case, everyone would die, starting with the weak, and then he added to his comrades that the main thing was for them to stay close to him, then they would not die. The comrade asked again if he really wanted to participate in the raid, and Sang-hyuk replied that he had already been paid a deposit as an advance. This hunter also said that he had a perfect plan and this Jinsu would not find a single loophole. His comrade agreed, but said that the fate of their country was at stake now, and he was only concerned about being caught. And suddenly Park Sang-hyuk told everyone to be quiet because the monster was already here. Everyone began to look closely and saw that the hunter Choi Moo-han from the Hwarang Guild had approached them. And next to him was that same unknown. The hunters were glad that with these two they would definitely be able to win. Sang-hyuk only thought that they were just talking in vain, not even imagining how dangerous the Forbidden Zone was. And if the problem could be solved by a couple of first-class rankers, it would have been sorted out long ago. Puck was sure that everyone except their guild would die in this raid. Daeyoung contacted Jinsu and told him that, as he requested, the third squad had been formed only from him. She also sent him a map of the restricted area on his phone and asked him to be careful. The goal of the first offensive squad, which consists of the Hwarang Guild, was to retake the area occupied by the new species of spiders. The second attack squad is dispersed at the energy plant, which will be the outpost for this raid. There is a railroad adjacent to it, and he needed to get a place, at least for the sake of supplying provisions. And Kwon himself planned to get deeper to fight the Spider Queen and her subordinates. Jinsu hoped that this raid would not allow anyone to make a mistake, because if there was even one mistake, it would be the end of their country. Kwon looked at the map. There were only 6 places marked with the supposed location of the Spider Queen. To begin with, Jinsu decided to clear out the one that was closest to him. Soon, Kwon arrived alone at the abandoned building, but even after entering inside, he did not feel any traces of monsters. The guy went down the stairs to the first floor of the basement and began to look around. There he saw 3 spiders, who were hanging from the ceiling and waiting for prey. Seeing the man, the monsters immediately rushed after him. The guy noticed that they were slower than he expected. Kwon also identified all of their potential attacks and even thought that he had taken the Forbidden Zone too seriously. The spiders didn't seem too dangerous to him. He could fight with something like that for as long as he wanted. The spiders were indeed too slow, and Kwon dealt with them very quickly. The guy was sure that the rankers of the other attack squads could easily deal with such spiders. and the only one who posed a threat was that new species. Suddenly, Jinsu heard someone asking if he was really as strong as the rumors said. Kwon looked back and saw a new species of monster approaching him. The guy noticed that this one was different from the one he saw in the video. This means that there are several individuals of the new species of spider. The spider said that they finally met, and Jinsu replied that her speech sounded as if she had been waiting for him. The monster told him that he was the only one of all the people gathered who posed a danger to the spiders. And then she added that she said it wrong, and in fact, Kwon is just a thorn in their side. Jinsu replied that he had been looking for her too, and she had reduced his workload. The spider only laughed. When the guy asked what made her laugh, the monster replied that she was amused by his delusion that everything would go as he planned. Kwon told her that everything would end once the hunters destroyed the new species like her, but the spider replied that this was precisely where the guy was mistaken. And today, all people would die. Jinsu asked how many more were like her, and she replied that he could think about it later if he survived. The spider immediately tried to attack Kwon, but he managed to block the blow and realized that she was very fast. Jinsu couldn't concentrate. Besides, it was impossible to get close to her. Her shoulder blades, plus her arms and movable legs, delivered multiple attacks at once. Kwon decided that in this case, it would be better to use long-range magical attacks. But the spider was still very fast, and the guy needed to somehow buy time. Jinsu summoned many daggers and launched them at the monster. But as soon as they approached her skin, they immediately fell to the ground. The guy realized that she had telekinesis, and close combat was not advantageous for him. And because of the narrow space, it was impossible to use magic. At medium range, not a single attack worked, and Kwon had only one option: expose himself until she figured out her tactics. She must have some kind of weakness, and while Jinsu continued to think and dodge, the spider tried to strike him to death. Meanwhile, the other hunters were fighting with the remaining spiders, of which there were too many. One of the hunters shouted to request support from the rear, and there, having received the request, they decided to send the mages to the specified coordinates. Choi Moo-han and his men also decided to join the front lines. The magicians began to use their abilities in battle, and Choi approached the spiders closer and killed them. After killing several spiders, Moo-kan noticed one of the new species off to the side. The spider approached the hunter and said that she would kill him for dealing with her children. Choi replied that he was ready to resist her as much as she wanted, and so the fight began between them. The hunter noticed that she was very fast, but he could easily repel attacks of this level. However, no matter how much Choi fought, for some reason his attacks did not work on her, and then he received a strong blow from her. Flying to the side, Moo-kan realized that he could not cope with her alone. The hunter saw how strong this kind of spider was and even accepted that he would have to die here. His men became worried and rushed towards him. His wound looked serious, and his subordinates suggested that he retreat. And Choi replied that if this creature is not stopped now, then there is no point in running. And then the chairman said to contact the squad of magicians in the rear and tell them to concentrate all magic on the coordinates of his location. The hunters realized that in that case, he would die. But Moo-kan told them not to worry and to tell them to mobilize all forces. The people left, and the chairman rushed to attack the spider with his remaining forces. But she kept telling Choi that she couldn't be defeated and that she would kill him after she had played enough. And then she added that if he was so impatient to die, then she would fulfill this wish. Moo-kan's attacks were still not enough to break through the spider's telekinesis, and he decided to keep her attention a little longer. Over time, the monster finally realized that the hunter was just stalling for time, but said that it wouldn't work. She also said that her younger sister went to meet Jinsu, and there was no way he would get here alive. At this moment, Choi received a message that his people had completed preparations to activate the magic. Moo-kan replied to the spider that they were not as weak as she thought, and again rushed to attack. And at the moment when the hunter thought he could strike, the monster grabbed him by the neck and said that she had opened herself up on purpose. And Choi replied that he also let himself be caught on purpose and broke off a piece of her shoulder limb. His men were already ready to launch a magical attack, and all that was needed was to take the chairman. But for now, something was preventing him from being summoned back. At this time, ice shards were already flying at the spider, but this did not frighten her. She put up a protective barrier, but the shards still broke through it. And then the human part of her body exploded, and the hunters worried if they had hit it. The spider was still alive, although badly wounded, and then people began to hear a strange sound. One hunter looked through binoculars and replied that a huge number of spiders were rushing towards them. The command was given again to prepare for battle, as they could not allow the spiders to carry off the female spider. However, the magical squad had spent all its strength and could no longer provide insurance for the hunters. And it was simply impossible to resist such a number without magical support, but still the hunters could not allow the spider to survive. Having summoned all the shooters and archers, they prepared to destroy the new species, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. Here, one of the hunters told the commander that a gate had formed at the front. It was not appropriate for them at that moment. And suddenly they saw a skeleton in a cuirass coming out of the passage. 5 more skeletons in armor followed him. The hunters decided to deal with them first and then return to the spiders. But then the people saw something they didn't expect at all. The skeletons didn't attack them, but rushed to attack the spiders. The skeletons quickly dealt with the spiders, and the hunters realized that the skeletons were on their side and also rushed to attack. Jinsu approached the wounded spider. The guy realized that one of the people had made a deal with them and was leaking information. Kwon asked the spider this question, but she was silent, and the guy said that if she did not answer, she would die. After his attack, the monster died, and Jinsu received 1 soul, a giant spider shell, and a hook of gluttony. Soon, the Hunter branch office was informed that the enemy had been destroyed. And Dayoung asked about the situation of the other squads. The communications officer immediately said that Jinsu had joined the second squad, but the third had not yet contacted. At this time, Kwon called Dayoung and said that he urgently needed to report something. A little later, there was a meeting at the branch, and one of the employees said that everyone needed time to recover. And since the Hwaran Guild can no longer fight, it is now unclear how to continue the raid. Another employee said that 2 boss-level monsters had been caught and that this should be their chance. And the monsters could recover while they were delaying their decision. Dayan said that there is no right solution, but there is a problem that among the hunters, someone made a deal with the spiders. And if that's true, then the spiders know about all the powers that the branch has. The girl also asked the staff how many hunters could join. The employee analyzed and said that there were about 100 hunters of rank A and above. Meanwhile, Jinsu had found the spider's lair. He thought it was stupid to bring A-rank hunters here, as it would only increase the number of victims. The guy will only need an S-rank tank to back him up. Jinsu called Apple and then asked him to call the skeleton army from the village here. The ball tried to dissuade the guy, but he insisted. Although he understood that if Apple was resisting, then it was very dangerous. Kwon said that if you send the skeletons forward as tanks, he can fight just fine. The ball tried, but then said that the gate did not want to open, perhaps because the restricted area did not have an exact position value. Apple explained that every place has its own width, longitude, and height, and the gate can move in space only when there is accurate information of this data. And the coordinates of this place simply do not exist, so the ball cannot form a gate. Kwon was upset that he could not use the most powerful weapon he had, a forbidden zone known as the 7th most difficult in the entire world. Around 100 hunters of A rank and above have formed a raid to conquer this land. And although the huge number of spiders frightened the squad, they could not be stopped by simple giant spiders. About 2 hours passed in the battle, and the squad was finally able to reach the cave of the womb. There they saw cocoons with people inside. Jinsu said that from now on, we need to be more careful and not let our guard down. And San-hyuk, as usual, egged him on, saying that ultimately, weaklings will still die. This guy couldn't understand how Kwon managed to survive the fight with the new species. And Kwon, in turn, thought about him that he was only trying to save his own skin and was not even going to go to the front lines. Deep in the cave, the hunters saw a huge ball of webbing and thought that the thing contained the queen. There were no spiders nearby to guard, and people hoped that the end was near. They rushed to destroy the ball when suddenly another spider of a new species appeared and immediately killed several hunters. When this spider wanted to kill the next one, a female spider came up to him and told him not to kill. She wanted to enjoy herself first. Jinsu was shocked. After all, they said that there were no more new species. The guy even began to think that they had no chance. The spiders also blocked the entrance, and Kwon realized that this had all been a trap from the start. Jinsu told the others to break through the rear, clear a path and retreat, and he would take care of the spiders to buy time. However, the entire entrance was filled with giant spiders, but the hunters still rushed to attack. Only San-hyuk and his friends remained in place. This guy's main target remained Kwon, who meanwhile was engaged in a verbal altercation with the new spiders. Jinsu also saw that these two were stronger than the previous ones, and the male spider had magical power that scorched the skin. Meanwhile, the spiders were curious about how Quan was able to defeat their sisters, and the male spider immediately attacked the guy to test his strength. Quan had a hard time fighting this enemy, and in one moment he won. Jinsu came back again after spending one sharp turn, but the male spider somehow guessed that the guy could turn back time. Spider was also curious about what had changed and swung at Quan again. However, he missed and realized that Jinsu had been reading his trajectory. Suddenly, Quan felt his legs go numb and he thought the spider was using telekinesis. The spider grabbed the guy and pierced him with its sharp limbs. After another turn, the spider again felt that the guy had used this ability. Jinsu saw that even the law of causality had no effect on this monster and decided that he would continue to drag out time for now. Meanwhile, the hunters fought the giant spiders to the limit of their abilities, and Jinsu himself, all he could do for now was barely dodge, and he didn't know how much longer he could hold out. And after each sharp turn, the spider used new tricks to attack. Once again, when the spider completely fettered Quan's body, the guy called Apple to summon Papyrus. Char was a little reluctant, saying it was dangerous, but Jinsu said that death was waiting for him anyway. The papyrus appeared before the boy, and the ability, Heavenly Demon Spiritual Technique, was preserved there. Quan immediately used this technique, and his body was freed from the influence of telekinesis. The spider couldn't understand what had happened and told the spider not to go near the guy. And while the male spider realized that Jinsu was able to dispel telekinesis, the guy had already hit the female spider with all his might, and she got stuck in the wall after the blow. After that, Quan took on the male spider, and the hunters, seeing how their comrade was fighting, began to clear the way to the exit even more diligently. There were only a few spiders left to destroy, and the passage would be clear. But suddenly, Sang-hyuk killed several hunters. He told the people that none of them would leave here, and the hunters realized that he had conspired with the spiders. Sang-hyuk said that actually everything should have ended much earlier, but Quan turned out to be much stronger than he thought. He also said that all hunters should become food for hungry spiders. The commander was not going to leave it like that and started a fight with the traitor, but he turned out to be stronger. Jinsu continued to fight the male spider. The technique of the heavenly demon was of little help in winning, and time was running out. And then Quan used the heavenly demon spirit sword. It greatly strengthened his dagger, but he also felt that his body could not withstand the over-ranked skills. Jinsu had one last push left, and he had to deliver the killing blow, even though it would be difficult. The spider realized that this time Quan would be able to defeat him and immediately received a blow from the enemy. Park Sang-hyuk couldn't believe that Jinsu was winning, and he couldn't let that happen. And the spider's powers stopped working, and Quan tried to finish him off as quickly as possible. But then Sang-hyuk decided to stop him and launched 3 magic arrows from Jinsu. The arrows hit Quan's sword and scattered. Only then did he notice the traitor. The traitor told Jinsu that if he destroyed the new species, there would be a hole in his plan. According to him, the raid on the Forbidden Land was destined to fail from the very beginning. And while Quan was distracted by the traitor, the male spider did not waste time and dealt the guy a strong blow. Under Jinsu. And on top of that, the 5 minutes given for using the heavenly demon spiritual technique had passed. Quan lost his chance to deal with the spider because of Park Sang-hyuk, and then his heart felt like a dagger pierced him. Pak just smirked at Jinsu, who suddenly felt unimaginable pain. Quan fell to the floor, and Sang-hyuk told his men that it was time to get out of here, just so that they captured this guy. The male spider asked Puck where he was taking the body, and he reluctantly replied that he needed him alive because there was a man who wanted to kill him with his own hands. But this didn't suit the spider. He wanted to see this guy die and told Sang-hyuk to kill him here. Now, a verbal altercation began between Puck and the spider, and Puck reminded him that they had a contract and that he should not cross the line. 24 hours later, the Hunter Branch's management department stared at the blacked-out screen in shock. They knew they had failed, and no movement was detected in the vicinity of the restricted area. The only good thing was that the spiders at least didn't leave the restricted area. Daeon left for a short time, saying to let her know if anything appeared. The director, before leaving the branch, left her one address just in case, and she went there. A blonde man opened the door and asked why she had come. Daeon said that the boss had sent her here, but he only said that she had the wrong address, and the girl asked him to listen to her. After all, she had to save the hunters stuck in the spider's lair in the Forbidden Zone. Daeyoung told him about the problem and asked him to help them. Kanet only asked if Kwon Jinsu had entered there. Daeyeon said that contact with him and the others had been lost for 24 hours. Then the healer came out and invited the girl into the house. The old man said that from Young's words, Quan should be in the forbidden area now, but the tracking magic shows that he is in a completely different place. After telling Kenneth to get ready, he himself began to get ready to save Jinsu. Young immediately asked him about the other hunters, and James replied that Quan's life was more valuable than the lives of all the other hunters combined. But the girl continued to insist that he help others, saying that it would harm his reputation. Then he decided to talk to Kenneth, who later told the old man that these were just clumsy threats. And the healer replied that the girl might make a fuss if they didn't help. And besides, that way they could leave Korea in their debt. The old man also said that as soon as they freed Jinsu, he would immediately go back to save others. And if they had to go there anyway, it would be better to do it loudly. Kenneth James told him to go with Daeon, and he replied that the higher-ups might not like it. But the old man said that he would take everything upon himself. The girl was surprised that they would have to go together. She considered it crazy. Meanwhile, Kwon Jinsu sat tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Having come to his senses, the guy saw in front of him only a door in the darkness in which some man was standing. It was Chairman Cheel, a group that was thirsty for revenge, and the guy immediately started teasing him. Chan told Kwon that he would let him live for a month, but during that time, the boy would experience all the pain that exists in the world. Jinsu replied again that the country would be filled with spiders during that time. But Chan was only in the mood for revenge and was about to pull out the boy's nails. Here, the subordinate informed the chairman that someone had broken into their room and advised them to leave the place quickly. Chan got angry but left. A Jinsu tried to free himself, but he couldn't release the magic power. The guy noticed a ring on his finger and thought that it was holding back his mana. Then Kwon wouldn't be able to get out of here alone. He was also curious about who the intruder was, since it could have been someone who came to save him. And Chan's people saw that only an old man had come to them, but they did not understand where he got so much strength from. And they began to use everything they had against him. It was James Wedgwood, healer. He enveloped himself in a dome, and Chan's men were unable to harm him. The chairman shouted at them not to stop, while the healer prepared a fireball and launched it at the opponents. There was an explosion, and almost all the guards were killed. Only one remained. The old man thought that even though he controlled the power, an ordinary hunter would not have been able to withstand such a blow. Captain Pak, who had stood firm, immediately began shooting at the healer again, and several bullets pierced the old man's body. The guy started grinning that he couldn't repel the attack because he had a special gun. And the healer told him that he should at least be rewarded for his efforts. At the same time, the old man's wounds began to heal very quickly. Not even a trace remained. The captain knew that such an ability existed and was not surprised, and the healer only told him to stand aside. But Pak apologized and said that he had to do the job he was paid to do. Then he thought that if he cut off the old man's head, he could kill him. Hiller immediately used a triple shield, and the captain used acceleration and began to shoot at the old man from all sides. He even hit James in the head, but he continued to stand motionless. And just when Pak thought he had succeeded, the old man's wounds began to heal again. The chairman began to shout that he would not let Jinsu go and that he must die in agony. Hiller told Chan that he had no time to talk to him, and Chan just kept shouting at Pak to kill the old man. James got fed up with this and asked Chan if he could do anything other than shout and hire useless hunters for money. Hiller also said that the head does not shift everything onto subordinates and does not hide behind their backs. The old man slammed Chan against the wall and then told Pak to take him and leave. Otherwise, he would go on the offensive. James walked further, and Jinsu was very surprised when he saw him. Hiller untied the boy and said that Im Dae-young had told him about the situation in general terms. Kwon said that he would thank the old man later, but for now, he needed to hurry to the forbidden area before it was too late. James assumed the boy would run even in that state, but he told Kwon that if he died, he would put him in an awkward position. Jinsu asked him what he was planning, and the old man told him to just stand there, since high-level magic requires complete concentration. Hiller put his hands on the boy's shoulders, and his magical power was immediately restored. Then James asked, "What about the Forbidden Zone?" And Kwon replied that it had no coordinates, so it was impossible to open a portal. The old man said that nothing was impossible and began to open the portal, but he had to wait a little. Jinsu asked the healer why he was helping him, since it didn't seem like a goodwill gesture. The old man replied that the boy was right and that he really did need something. Kwon guessed that James wanted him, but said that he had no intention of becoming a hunter for another country. Hiller replied that this was not necessary, since the organization was transnational. And then he asked the guy since when he thought monsters had existed on Earth. Quan replied that since the Day of Judgment, and the old man said that monsters existed long before that. It was just that after the Day of Judgment, their number increased significantly. At first, they managed to contain them with their own forces, but after the Day of Judgment, the number of gates increased to a critical level. Eventually, they reached a point where their strength was no longer enough, and a decision was made to select the best hunters from each country. And then the old man formally introduced himself, calling himself a member of the Vatican, the head of the Knightly Order of Cheyenne, by the name of James Wedgwood.